because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you and welcome to the show. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense, which you already knew because you've been having a fantastic 4 hours there with Mike Graham on this beautiful, beautiful sunny morning. I have to say, I'm just waiting for everyone to go, ooh, climate change. But I think even the doom mongers are actually enjoying having a little bit of sunshine for a change. Enjoy it while it lasts. I'm hearing the end of the bank holidays not looking so great. But hey, it's Britain. Of course, that's what's happening. But what an interesting day for Tony Blair to give his tuppence worth. Well, we'll talk about that in just a moment. And there's basically, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is great to have your company. So what we are going to be talking about an awful lot over the next few hours, and certainly in the next hour, is what Sir Tony Blair, the former Labour Prime Minister, had to say, attacking, well, it would appear, his own Labour colleague Keir Starmer's net zero policies. In the foreword for a new report from the Tony Blair Institute, he says that net zero policies are irrational and doomed to fail. He's called for a radical reset. I know, I checked the date as well. I know it's April, but it's not the first. The former Prime Minister said it's wrong for people to be asked to make financial sacrifices and changes in lifestyle when they know that their impact on global emissions is minimal. He talks about sort of technological changes and things being the way to do this. Well, I mean, it is extraordinary that we've got some sanity on this. We'll talk about that throughout the show. Meanwhile, though, on the other side of the debate, the Climate Change Committee, the government supposedly, quote, independent, quote, advisors, a bunch of complete, just usual suspects on a quango. They say the government's progress on reaching net zero is either too slow, has stalled, or is heading in the wrong direction. So that's something to cheer about, eh? Meanwhile, immigration judges have been accused of potentially breaching the Judicial Code of Conduct as the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, accuses them of pushing activist views and backing open borders. Tell us something we didn't already know, Mr. Jenrick. And a train, as you've just been discussing there on Mike's show, a train has been wrapped in woke artwork celebrating the diverse ethnicity of its operators' workforce and the communities it serves. Digital artist Baraka Carberry, who created the work for Avanti West Coast, says it shows scenes of people, culture, colours and joy. But why? Why? Why is this necessary? No one cares. They just want the trains to run on time. Call me old-fashioned, but those are the things that we really care about in this country, or whatever colour skin we are. Anyway, this is Talk. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense. Hopefully an awful lot being talked also by my lovely guest today. With the Pastel Girls today, if you're watching on the telly. I'm in pale pink, she's in pale purple. Former Conservative Government Advisor Claire Pearsall. Very good morning to you.
Morning.
We're dressed as girls today.
We are. It's sunny.
I've come as a girl.
Identifying as.
Going to talk about a trans judge up very later in the show. That will come up. Well, I mean, I'm wearing flat shoes though, so under Eddie Izzard's rules, still a boy.
Oh, so am I.
Yeah.
I mean, what is this?
So difficult to keep up with the rules. So difficult to keep up with the rules. So difficult to keep up with the extraordinary change that we are seeing on net zero. I mean, Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, Keir Starmer, they've completely doubled down. They're absolutely 100%, everything they say, and an awful lot of what they do, but not all of it, some of it's very contradictory, committed to net zero policies. Tory party was, until Kemi Badenoch said about a month or so ago, actually, this net zero target 2050 isn't achievable. We need to talk about that. She didn't go as far as Nigel Farage in Reform, who's been very clearly sort of saying, look, this is absolutely insane policy, as I've been saying for many years, and unachievable. But absolutely fascinating that the former Prime Minister, Tony Blair, the day before local elections, in which many pollsters are saying that Labour will be doing very badly. And one of the issues, of course, is, is people's sense of how the country is doing and where it's going, and particularly economic policy and people's cost of living. Key part of that is the net zero costs and the fact that we've got such high energy costs as a result of net zero policies. There's a clear link. But saying that people were being asked to make financial sacrifices and changes in lifestyle when they know their impact on global emissions is minimal, 1% of emissions, but also because it's not going to make any difference. And basically saying debates become irrational. People are terrified of saying so for fear of being accused of being climate deniers. Hi, yeah, that's me. And they said these are the inconvenient facts, which mean that any strategy based on either phasing out fossil fuels in the short term or limiting consumption is a strategy doomed to fail. How significant is it that not only a former Prime Minister, but a Labour former Prime Minister, who still has huge influence on his former party, has come out and said this?
Well, I think it's enormous for the Labour Party because Tony Blair still has a reasonable following within Labour circles, and people do listen to what he says. And I think the day before a set of local elections couldn't have come at a worse time for Sir Keir Starmer.
Do you think he thought that through?
Oh, I think this was very calculated. I also think that this is perhaps part of a way of getting rid of Ed Miliband. There is, rumours
Well, Ed Miliband and Tony Blair apparently have been long-time friends and allies.
Yeah, right to a point, though. You think, how much does Tony Blair want to make a comeback into frontline politics? He's always been there in the background. And if you're starting to then isolate people off, so Sir Keir Starmer will get rid of Ed Miliband, and
Tony Blair doesn't want to come. Tony Blair would only want to come back to frontline politics if he could be the president of the EU. He doesn't want to be in frontline politics. He wants to be influential, but he also wants to carry on making huge sums of money from China and whichever other dictators that he's happy to take money from.
Well, this is it. But you don't know what has been offered to him by Sir Keir Starmer in order to help get rid of people out of his cabinet.
That would be very interesting, wouldn't it? Because I've always said, I don't think Ed Miliband lasts the full 5 years. I mean, I'd be surprised if he makes it the year at this point. Same for Rachel Reeves at this point. Keir Starmer's going to look for people to blame. He's like, oh, well, that was them, nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, Keir Starmer signed up to a manifesto. Ed Miliband didn't write the manifesto, Keir Starmer did.
Yeah.
No facts have changed whatsoever since that manifesto was written. Other than, oh, you're now the person in power, oops. Now you're having to deal with the fallout of these insane policies. Same with Kemi Badenoch. Again, she wasn't the leader of the Tories ahead of the election, but nevertheless, no facts have changed. People changing their view now. There's political expediency. There's also, there's been cowardice to this date, hasn't there? If Keir Starmer knows his policy's mad, and he's a clever man, he must know that, mind you, he doesn't know what a woman is, so unless the Supreme Court tells him. So it's difficult to know. Yeah. But dump the policy, be honest about it, dump the minister who's pushing it, and be honest about it. It shows such a lack of spine, doesn't it?
It does, but it also a lack of understanding about what matters to people. And I think everybody does their bit. People recycle, people switch off lights.
I only recycle because they collect my recycling once a week and only collect the other bins once a fortnight. Otherwise, I would not recycle. I'm telling you honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I have two bins.
Don't care.
But a lot of people
goes into landfill. Who are we kidding?
A lot of people do care about that, and they do recycle and they do their bit. You turn off lights in rooms that you're not using.
They do that because of the cost.
But
most people do that because they're practically required to, or they do it because of the cost.
And you go to charity shops to recycle clothes, you use textile banks and things like that. You don't just chuck things into landfill.
Yeah.
I think that people are seeing that they do their part, but government is forcing something upon them that they don't want.
Talk about the heat pumps, the EVs, and all that. Again, none of these policies survive contact with reality. I've said that for a very long time. Yeah. But it is interesting because on the same day as this report was being made publicised, it came out early hours of Tuesday, the Climate Change Committee, called the Independent Government Advisors, I don't know who appoints these people. I mean, the fact that the woman who chairs the committee hasn't even got a science degree. I've got more qualifications in this than she has. I mean, put me on the Climate Change Committee. I'll get this stuff sorted for you, no problem. But they've issued a new report being very critical of the government, saying progress on achieving net zero, which is their raison d'etre, and indeed a legal requirement for all governments, thanks to the Tories. Thanks for that, Theresa May. The progress is either too slow, has stalled, or is heading in the wrong direction. And they say this could leave the UK vulnerable to serious economic and health impacts in the decades ahead. We haven't done enough investment in flood defences and things like that. But of course, actually, it's climate change policies, net zero, which leaves us very vulnerable, as we saw with Spain and Portugal with those blackouts. And it's not Nigel Farage saying it, it's energy experts. It's the actual people who run the Spanish electricity grid who say it's not lack of nuclear power. It's not it wasn't a weather event. It wasn't a cyber attack. Most likely cause was a problem with intermittent sort of boost of energy from solar panels, from solar farms, and that messed up the grid. The grid couldn't handle it, and that is part of the problem of having intermittent energy from unreliable, insecure sources. The grid doesn't. Maybe they could strengthen the grid. I don't know. I don't claim to be an expert in this field, just like the Climate Change Committee and Ed Miliband, indeed. But at the end of the day, the most likely cause of those blackouts appears to be over-reliance on solar power. OK? So, but we're trying to move to more reliance on solar power than even they have in Spain. They're at 53%, and we want to go to 95% solar and wind renewables. Now, I'm sorry, the biggest risk to this country is net zero.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And we don't have enough sun in this country. It's really sunny today and it will be for the next couple of days, but that doesn't last.
Yeah. And the reason we talk about it is because it's not normal.
Precisely. I mean, it's a very British thing to do, to talk about the weather. And they had to shut down some of the wind turbines when it was too windy and you couldn't put it into the grid. So let's get away from that. It is utterly, utterly ridiculous.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things, Ed Miliband says he's in favour of this as well, and Tony Blair talks about, using technology, carbon capture.
Which is nonsense.
But again, it's
utter nonsense.
Also, what's going to possibly go wrong with burying a carbon underground? I don't know.
It's not worked anywhere.
But exactly. But I mean, but AI and whatever it is. Look, when the technology appears, we'll all move to it. Because it will be better and cheaper and everything, but it's not there yet. But you can't force that technology. I'm all for government investment in that technology, but don't force us to change. And bearing in mind, the Climate Change Committee has been very, very clear. They put it in black and white. It's not me saying it. The Climate Change Committee has been really clear. Things that will need to be done for us to go even close to net zero targets. Limit on you being able to fly. Limit on you using your own car. Having to buy an EV car, but possibly not even being allowed to, being able to afford to drive an EV car. Limiting your dairy and your meat intake, things like that. Having to have a heat pump that doesn't actually heat your home in winter. Brilliant. We are talking about major impacts on our lifestyle. People simply won't put up with it. It doesn't survive an election when people know the reality. And as each of these policies gets, the targets, they were 10 years away and then they were 5 years away. When these targets start becoming real, each time the government backs away from them. And it doesn't matter the political hue of the party, because they realise these are absolutely catastrophic when it comes to public support. But I wonder how much Tony Blair's intervention is going to make a difference. I want to hear from you on this. I mean, I think we're all surprised he hasn't suggested digital ID cards as the answer to net zero, but in climate change. I mean, I'm amazed he hasn't thought of that. But he says net zero is irrational. It's doomed to fail. He's still signed up to the whole climate change, but let's just not be hysterical about it. Let's use tech to deal with it. I don't mind that. I'll take that. Politicians, he said, shouldn't force people to make financial sacrifices to meet climate targets because they know it's not going to make any difference, OK? What's your reaction to that? Why do you think he said it, particularly the day before the local elections? Do you think the government's basically, Keir Starmer's kind of in on it, wink, wink? Do you think this is a brilliant thing that should be welcomed? Is it, Tony Blair, well, stop clocks right occasionally? I'd love to hear from you what your thoughts are on this. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text us on 87222. Get in touch with us on X @TalkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. But I realise a lot of you are now just currently sunbathing. Sorry, working from home. And may not be able to have the energy to pick up the phone. I realise that, but I'd love to hear from you. Let's talk about the local elections too. Last day of campaigning today. Not allowed to talk about it at all tomorrow, usual rules. Although actually most people in the country don't have local elections tomorrow. No. Even some of the places that were supposed to have them, they've been delayed for a couple of years because of various changes to the structure of local government. There's no doubt at all, Reform are riding high. Lib Dems are hoping to do well, probably Greens as well. The two big parties doing very badly. The latest polling from More in Common show basically from 1,700 voters asked who they thought would be most effective running the country. 41% said none of the above. The highest politician they put was Nigel Farage at 23%, Starmer at 19%, Kemi Badenoch way behind on 8%. The Lib Dems' Ed Davey was on 6%. But basically people are saying they simply don't trust anyone to run the country well. That's understandable, given how badly run our country has been, but it's also very dangerous in a democracy, isn't it?
It is, and it always worries me when people say that they're not going to go out and vote if they have elections in their area. And I always say to people, do be part of the process. Spoil your ballot paper, it doesn't matter, but you need to be part of this. You need to pay attention because these people will look after the services that you rely upon in your local area. So
these are very real. They will be making decisions about EMF session, bin collection, street lighting, whether or not you're painting a zebra crossing in rainbow colours or not, how much money goes into schools, they are going to be deciding potholes. They're deciding really important stuff that affects your day-to-day life.
Yeah, they really are, and I think that people just dismiss them as, oh, well, it's not worth bothering about, it doesn't really matter, but it absolutely does. If you have children in school, if you want your local doctor's surgery to be able to function, your local hospital, your leisure centre, cemeteries, recreation parks, all of those kind of things that are looked at by local councillors, and they should be invested in their local area, and it's really important that you know who they are and you can eyeball them and say, what are you going to do about it?
I remember when Saudi Arabia started allowing women to vote in local elections only, which is jolly nice of them. People say how wonderful it is. I'm just amazed by the number of people who don't vote. Always vote. When you have a chance to vote, always vote. And even if your vote is spoiling your ballot paper is a totally valid point. If half the country did that, me, I think it should be compulsory voting. You get rights from living in democracy. You also have responsibilities, and one of them is just filling out a ballot every now and then. It's not much to ask.
30 seconds.
It's not much to ask, is it? Or get your kids to do it. I don't know if that's illegal or not. Probably. I just want to talk about immigration as well. Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, he has accused immigration judges of being, potentially breaching the Judicial Code of Conduct, advocating highly charged political views. He says that basically, especially in some of these asylum cases and other types of immigration claims, they've been infiltrated by activist judges. I don't think that's even up for debate, given some of the rulings we've had. Mr. Albanian criminal, kids chicken nuggets, and in Albania won't like them. A convicted paedophile being allowed to stay in this country because it'll be detrimental to his own children. Who thankfully he hadn't abused, to be separated from him, probably detrimental to have a paedophile father, I would have thought. But there we are, choices we make, everybody. But there's no doubt at all that even if we left the ECHR now, that's simply not going to deal with the problem, is it?
No, it'll make absolutely no difference to this. And this has been something that's ongoing for a long time, that these judges are also part of either charities or other organisations which look after the rights of refugees or migrants. They shouldn't be allowed to sit on those judgment panels at the same time. They really shouldn't.
It's a political statement. I think that it's not political. It is political, absolutely. I'd love to hear from you on all of this. 0344 499 1000. Up next, going to take a quick break. We're going to take your calls just after 10:30. Before that, we're going to be talking to the Conservative Shadow Minister, Kevin Hollinrake, about all the big stories in the news. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Britain got to the target, the rest of the world probably wouldn't. Well, we would have destroyed our industry. The rest of the world would be profiting at our expense, and we would have sacrificed ourselves for nothing. I mean, that's what the government policy is leading to at the moment. But Tony Blair, as quite rightly said, it's doomed to failure. He's effectively said government policy, and, you know, he's a former Labour Prime Minister. He said the current Labour Prime Minister's policy is doomed to failure.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:23 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk right now with Conservative Shadow Housing and Communities Secretary Kevin Hollingray, who joins us now. Very good morning to you, Kevin.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. I do want to talk about local elections, of course, which are coming up tomorrow, of course, the final day of campaign today. But I must talk to you about the front page of many of the papers today. Tony Blair, the former Labour Prime Minister, basically telling not just other politicians, but also his own big mate, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, that net zero is irrational and doomed to fail in terms of those policies by 2050. Your party leader, Kemi Badenoch, has rolled back on those policies, saying that 2050 isn't achievable. But how significant do you think it is that a former Labour Prime Minister, as senior as Tony Blair, has said this?
Yeah, I think it is significant, and I think he's clearly kind of rolling the pitch, preparing the ground for Keir Starmer to backtrack on that commitment. And they're clearly playing catch up with Kemi Badenoch, who came out with this a number of weeks ago, and as one of the few parliamentarians, you'll remember in the actual debate when it was back in, I think, 2019, that she expressed concerns about the deliverability of net zero back then. So this isn't just Johnny come lately on this issue. She's been a bit sceptical in terms of our ability to meet net zero by 2050 for all that time.
But I mean, there's no doubt at all this is now becoming something of a dividing line between the left and the right. Reform fully opposed to net zero and have been some time. Kemi Badenoch pretty much saying, look, we're going to be dropping the policy. Labour, Lib Dems, Greens still fully officially signed up to those policies. Do you think at the next election, if I'm 4 years away still, that actually is going to be a big dividing line? Because as Tony Blair points out, people are being asked, and, you know, the Climate Change Committee that advised the government, they're very blatant about this. It's all in black and white. The financial sacrifices, the lifestyle changes people are going to be required to make to achieve anything close to those goals, and they still won't reach those goals, are some things that people aren't willing to do.
Well, I mean, I'm old enough to remember Tony Blair saying that a couple of decades ago, actually, saying that you've got to take people with you on this, and it's technology will have the answer. Yeah. I mean, I'm not against a transition at all, and I don't think Kemi is, and in fact the other parties are not, even Reform are not against a transition, but we've got to do it in a way that's affordable for people and indeed businesses as well. You know, we cannot have a situation where UK businesses, particularly those heavily dependent on energy, so steel and other parts of our industry, are priced out of the market. And that's what's happening right now. We've got some of the most expensive energy prices, certainly in terms of electricity, in the developed world. So you've got to make sure that businesses can compete on a fair and level playing field. So, and there's no doubt that's moving too quickly towards net zero, purely wind, solar, which seems to be Ed Miliband's goal, it would be a mistake right now. Yeah. And
well, it was always a mistake, and you guys were signed up to. Look, you're the Housing and Communities Shadow Secretary. I mean, you know, you want to build houses, you need things like concrete. How do you make concrete? You need fossil fuels.
Well, yes, of course you do, and I've never been against that. And if you remember, Julia, when the full fracking debate was on, I was very supportive of fracking because we need gas, and that's even though my constituency, about 80% of it is covered in petroleum exploration licenses. I think we've got to do what's right in the national interest. So I've never been against the exploration of fossil fuels.
Okay, let's talk about these polls ahead of the local elections tomorrow, because not looking good for Labour, or indeed for your party. A More in Common poll says that 41% of people basically say, asked who they thought would be most effective at running the country, they say none of the above. The highest vote was for Nigel Farage for Reform, 23%. Keir Starmer was for Labour at 19%. Your party leader, the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, just at 8%, only 2 points ahead of Ed Davey, the Lib Dems, on 6%. Why do you think that she is not making headway in the polls? Why do you think Reform is now ahead of Labour, according to latest polls? Everyone's kind of gone down, apart from the Reform Party. Why is she not making headway?
Well, let's be clear about the actual poll, what it said in terms of our party ratings. So Reform's on 26, we're on 25. Labour is a disastrous 18%.
Well,
it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a difficult night for us. We know that. Why is Kemi not cutting through at this point in time? Because it's early days. People will not trust us, much as we have many successes, which I've talked about on your programme before. So I won't repeat them now over the last 14 years. We made mistakes. That's a reality, particularly immigration. So until we bring forward some detailed policies, we've said there will be a cap on the numbers of people who come to this country and the net migration. We haven't said what that cap is yet. We've also until we do, I think people will take a watching brief, and there won't be any.
I don't know if people will even believe you with the cap. I'm old enough and old enough to remember net migration in the tens of thousands. Simpler, happier times, Kevin.
Well, you know this stuff, Julia. We couldn't control migration until 2020 because of free movement of people. We then obviously managed eventually to get Brexit done, so we could control migration. For 2 years, we didn't have any migration at all because of COVID. And then those last 2 years, you're definitely right, we made mistakes. It wasn't a failure of intention, it was a failure of execution. Boris and other people in the cabinet at that point in time got it wrong in terms of the rules. It's too easy to bring dependents over, for example. So we changed those rules. Unfortunately, that was too late. That is bringing numbers down. What you're seeing now is Labour backtracking on the changes we made. So we increased the salary cap to 38,000. They've dropped that back down again to the mid-20s. So this is going to increase the number of people coming to the UK. We've clamped down on it. Yep. But I think you'll find when the rules we bring forward, which we will put in place, the rules you will see people will like. And they'll be very strict, and it will be the case that will manage migration properly in terms of legal migration, but also will bring in a Rwanda-style scheme to make sure we have the proper deterrent to stop those small boats crossing.
The question is whether voters will believe any politicians on these issues anymore after so many years of basically being right. That's the reality. You know that. You know on the doorstep, you say this to voters, and they go, yeah, right, sure, come on.
Well, I get this disillusionment, of course I do. But I'll tell you what, you do your job because you want to make a difference, actually, as well as earn a living. And that's what people in politics do. We're not there here to try and hoodwink the public. We go in this to try and get things right. Do you think I'm not bothered about migration? I live here. My kids live here. Hopefully my grandchildren will live here when I get them. I'm born and brought up in my patch. I'm deeply committed to making sure I do the right thing by it.
I agree with you, and I think that is the case with most politicians. I actually do agree with you on that. I've always said that. But I do think also a lot of politicians live in a rarefied world where they don't actually live with the impact, and then they just shout.
I promise you I don't.
I know you don't, but they'll shout racist and bigot and everybody else. Can I just ask you, I know you've got to go about 10:35, so I want to get a couple more topics in. But you mentioned immigration. One of your colleagues, Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick, has accused immigration judges of basically pushing activist views, working for charities which help channel migrants, then making decisions on some of these upper tier tribunals, allowing people who, frankly, no one thinks should be in this country, people who have no right to be here, who've committed serious crimes, and allowing them to stay under completely spurious Article 8 right to a family life grounds. Do you think we need to have a root and branch clear out of activist judges?
I do, actually. I think it's totally wrong that people can kind of play both ends off against the middle. The reality is these judges are there to execute the will of Parliament. At the same time, a number of them seem to be involved in advising people how to work their way around the asylum rules. It's totally wrong. They've got to be... The judiciary is independent of government for a good reason, but the judiciary also has to be independent itself. It can't involve itself in politics and then criticize and then complain when the politicians criticise them, because I think it is totally wrong that these people, the judges, are not willing to execute the will of Parliament. And clearly the will of Parliament is to make sure people who do not have the right to be here are not able to stay here, and certainly not with the assistance of those judges.
Talking of people that I think a lot of people are very angry about, the Belfast rap trio Kneecap, I'm not going to pretend I'd ever heard of them until they hit the news. Let's not pretend most politicians had. But they've been cancelled from a gig at the Eden Project, now being questioned, there's now a police investigation over comments they've made at various different gigs, one in which they shouted up Hamas, up Hezbollah, another in which they said, no, only good MP is a dead MP, kill your MP. Clear incitement to violence, clear backing and support for prescribed terrorist organisations. I'm a free speech advocate, but it doesn't include advocating violence against people, especially a group of people, MPs, where 2 have been murdered in very recent years. What should happen to Kneecap?
Well, I'm far more Luke Combs man than a Kneecap man, so I'd never listened to their songs, but I've read some of the lyrics, and it's totally outrageous. And what they seem to do, this band, they seem to say this stuff in their songs, which clearly influences people. They say, "Oh, we didn't really mean it. We didn't really mean that. We weren't advocating violence when clearly they were." And Kemi has said that this band should be banned, if I can put it like that. And I agree with it. You cannot have a situation. Freedom of speech has its limits. We all know that. And inciting violence is one of those limits.
But the band the group should be banned, or you're saying they should be prosecuted for inciting violence?
Well, either of those things. If they reach the bar of inciting violence, and that's a prosecutable offence, then that should happen, like it should to anybody else.
OK. Just finally, while we've been on air, news has just emerged regarding the case, you remember, of Chris Cabba. He was the violent South London gangster who was shot dead by a police officer, Sergeant Martin Blake, as part of a police operation back in 2022. Sergeant Martin Blake was actually charged with murder. He was cleared in a criminal trial. It's just been announced by the police that he will be facing a gross misconduct disciplinary hearing and could now face the sack. This is a man who had to pull his weapon to take out a man who was, revving his engine, driving his car at, and we all remember the details of this case, a violent gangster, long history of violence, suspect, to have a gun in the car. He shot him dead. Many would, certainly I would, regard that police officer as a hero who helped save lives. He's been cleared of murder by his peers, and now the police are pushing a gross misconduct disciplinary charge against him. What do you say to that?
Well, our default position should be support our officers who do fantastic work in the line of duty and take huge risks. So I'm very worried by that. Nobody's above the law. So if people have, for whatever reason, have deliberately breached the law in any way, then that's totally different. But that's not the facts in this case as I have read them. So, and certainly what the court decided wasn't the case. So I'm very concerned about that. Unless we send a strong message to our police officers and to our service personnel that they'll be protected when they do what they think is right in the line of duty and follow the rules, then they should be protected to the hilt. And I'm very concerned that that's not the case in this case.
Kevin Hollyrick, so appreciate you joining us. Conservative MP, Shadow Housing and Community Secretary, appreciate that. 10:35 is the time. Claire Pistol, just your reaction to that. You used to work in the Home Office. I mean, look, he's an armed Scotland Yard officer. He was cleared of murdering the violent gangster. And again, we always have this thing like, oh, it's a white officer, it's a black man who's been shot, and everyone starts thinking we're in a sort of American territory. No. He was a gangster. He was a gangster. I'm sorry. It's a good thing he's dead. He was a violent gangster. He was a criminal. He was shot dead because he was driving at officers in an attempt to smash his way out of a police roadblock. Sergeant Blake opened fire to protect his colleagues. Charged with murder, I thought outrageously. It took just 3 hours after a very lengthy trial for him to be found not guilty. He was immediately reinstated, but now he is facing possible gross misconduct, disciplinary and possible sacking. And this is the problem. Again and again and again, police officers who do amazingly brave things, who do the right things in the heat of the moment, probably saving lives, then face year after year after year of disciplinary proceedings. It was bad enough that he was ever named, because the risk to his family as a result of that, from retribution from the gang this man was in.
It's appalling, and we should be supporting these police officers who keep the streets safe. And it's no wonder people don't want to either stay in the police force or enter into the police force when we're going to treat them like this for doing their job.
Absolutely. Sergeant Martin Blake, we are 100% behind you. You have been cleared. You've been cleared by a panel of your peers on a jury of the most serious charge. You know, he did nothing wrong. He did what he had to do. Thank God for people like Sergeant Martin Blake, who keep our streets safe from those gangsters. And thank God, horrible little violent gangster Chris Cabba is dead, because our streets are safer as a result. I'm sorry, people don't like to say the truth, but that's the reality. Absolutely outrageous. The Met Police have got so many wrong-uns. You haven't got a wrong-un here. You've got someone who did his job. He was protecting him in public. He was protecting a fellow police officers. He's been cleared by a jury of his peers. It's just outrageous that officers have to face this. We've got, again, if he did, if he did something wrong, if he was went around, it was like a vindictive killing. No evidence for that whatsoever, which is why the jury cleared him. I just find this extraordinary. We have got to be backing our officers. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We'll take your calls up next. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. I'm just to bring you up to date that news that Sergeant Martin Blake, he is the Metropolitan Police officer, the armed officer who shot dead, just one bullet fired at Chris Cabba. He is the gangster who, only a week before he was stopped in this police roadblock, he had actually was caught on CCTV gunning down a rival in a packed nightclub in East London. He'd previously served a prison sentence for gun offences, part of the 67 47 gang, one of London's most violent and dangerous organised crime groups, linked to a string of shootings in the capital, and he was being followed by police, and he got gunned down as he tried to plough police down in his car, revving his engine, driving at the police. That officer, Sergeant Martin Blake, outrageously faced murder charges and was found not guilty, quite rightly. He now, though, faces a gross misconduct disciplinary. Could be sacked. And basically, disciplinary offences are based on the civil test, which is different from the criminal test. So it's not beyond reasonable doubt. It's whether an honest but mistaken belief must also be a reasonable, honest but mistaken belief. I just find it extraordinary our police officers are put through this when there's simply no evidence for this. Let's go to the phone calls. So 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Chris is on the line in Manchester. Chris, now I understand you're a former police officer, aren't you?
I am indeed, yes. I completely concur that it's a disgraceful course of events. Just for the benefit of accuracy, it will be the IOPC, not the Metropolitan Police who have ordered.
Apology, you're quite right. Apologies for that. Yeah.
This is not an unusual occurrence for police officers who face criminal proceedings if they are acquitted, for them then to face disciplinary proceedings. As you quite rightly pointed out, the burden of proof is much less in that the decision will be made on, firstly, balance of probability, and also the honestly held belief, which is a defence. The officer had a honestly held belief that it was necessary to do what he did. But in a disciplinary or civil case, he has to prove that was reasonable. Not that he felt that it was honoured, but somebody else thought it was reasonable. Now, how on earth someone else can think it's reasonable when they're not put in that position themselves?
Exactly. We're all armchair generals, aren't we? At that moment, and we know it was in the dark, it was very fast, and they are dealing with a man they know to be someone who, has been armed in the past. By the way, while you're talking, we're flashing up pictures of this and the CCTV from this shooting in a nightclub, but also there's this picture that was put out by the family immediately after his killing. The usual stuff. We had the same about Mark Duggan back in 2011, didn't we? This sort of, this wonderful young man, he's a father. Oh, yeah, has he met his kids by his various different women? A wonderful, smiling young man who never harmed anyone. Oh, he just happened to be linked to shootings. He just happened to be caught on CCTV killing someone. He just happened to be in prison for a previous gun offence. It just happened to have a string of offences. And there's this picture of this lovely young man. Oh, young man cut down in the prime of his youth. I'm glad he's dead. I'm glad he's off the streets and he's not a risk to anyone else. Thank you to Sergeant Martin Blake. Is a hero, isn't he?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Don't forget the architect. That he was a trainee architect.
Oh, yeah, of course he was.
Appear to be.
They always are. Or either that or they're about to be a professional footballer or have a singing career. Or girls, it's always top model. Yeah, genuinely. Chris,
loved his mum.
He loved his mum and was a wonderful son. But the reality is, this does put off officers carrying weapons, and we need them to be willing to carry weapons because we need to protect the public.
In the very unlikely event, and I suspect this won't get very far. In the unlikely event Sergeant Blake is found guilty by a misconduct hearing and is were to be sacked, I suspect that the entire Metropolitan Police firearms team would lay down their weapons immediately.
Quite right too.
That would put the Commissioner and the Home Secretary in an impossible position.
I'd say, it's interesting because the Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, he said he feared charging police in such situations. He says was crushing the spirit of good officers and was making London less safe. He said that after the jury acquitted Sergeant Martin Blake. You say it's not the Met Police. You're quite right. It's the IPCC doing this, but you'd be crazy to agree to be an armed officer in this country, given what they get put through. And I'm sure you agree. If someone's a wrong 'un and they've committed a crime as an armed officer or in any other officer, we want them investigated. But he was doing this in the course of his duties.
Yeah, well, I was briefly an armed officer, and it was very well known that basically, if you ever were foolish enough to discharge your weapon, you had one chance, and that was it.
Yeah.
And after that your career would be over. You certainly would never carry a firearm again.
Yeah, exactly. It is just extraordinary. Chris, so appreciate you calling in so quickly as well after that breaking news. Chris in Manchester is a former police officer. Just quickly from you, Cleb Hissel, because I mean we've had this debate so many times before, but this is the reality: is that the armed officers, we've seen them down their weapons. People just say, no, I'm not willing to do this. But we know. I mean, people often get very confused about American stats and things. Completely different here. Something like 26,000 incidents a year where armed officers are called to the scene, and weapons are fired at all. On average a year 3 times. The idea these people are trigger happy is absurd.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, they are carrying these firearms because they are going up against people with similar or worse firearms than them, and you have to be able to have might with might, don't you? It doesn't mean you discharge your weapon.
It's really that simple. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. Let's just squeeze in another call. Andrew's on the line in Hertfordshire. Andrew, you're calling in on the big topic we're talking about today. Tony Blair saying net zero is irrational and doomed to fail, and politicians need to sort of wake up and smell the coffee, basically. What do you make of what he had to say?
Yeah, it's very straightforward. Over the weekend, there'll be a reshuffle. This is setting the political agenda, and Miliband is gone. And Miliband knows that now today. So Starmer and Blair... Oh, it has to be, because as a result of the events of this week, there will have to be action taken. And what's the number one thing on people's minds? Migration and energy. So solve energy. You can't do migration immediately. You can do that. And in relation to your last story, every Metropolitan Police officer that carries a gun today, just go in and give your ticket in. You can't be forced to carry the gun. Give your ticket in, because you're trained and certified by the Home Office.
And they don't get paid a penny extra to do it.
No, you get, but you do it, and your ticket in, because it's over now. You're certified by the Home Office. To carry a firearm, it's reasonable force. Against you, an uncertified civilian with a firearm in criminals' hands is violence.
Simple as that.
It's over now. And may I say, you both look very nice in your safari colours today.
Andrew, thank you very much indeed. I normally have to wait for Georgina to call in to get the compliments. Andrew, thank you for your call. Very interesting. I mean, I don't think Ed Miliband lasts another year, but it'd be interesting if he does go that soon. Ooh. 10:48 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to talk about, the general madness of the trans nonsense, the rainbow nonsense, and a new diverse train. Deep size, everyone. This is Talk.
Exactly. And the worry is that standards are already or will in the future be diminished as a result of a kind of equalities drive to get more women into the Marines. Now, as you said, at the moment, no woman has ever made it into that elite, into the kind of the top level, what they call getting the green beret, becoming a Royal Marine Commando. But many are now trying, and there are women in the sort of lower ranks of the Marines.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, Claire Pearson also here. Let's talk right now about the latest woke madness. It's always there, guys. It's always there. Let's talk to a writer at Courage Media, Colin Tomlinson, who joins us. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia. Another clown's escaped the circus, so you've got me on again.
I mean, there are just too many clowns. The circus walls cannot be high enough. This story, really just got my goat. I know Mike Graham's as well. Avanti West Coast, you've had enough problems there of their own running trains on time. They have basically paid probably vast sums to digital artist Baraka Carberry to create a work for them showing, he says, she, I don't know, says, scenes of people, culture, colours and joy. Basically, they've wrapped a train in bold artwork celebrating the ethnicity of its operators' workforce and the communities it serves. It's all about, basically, celebrating diversity. And apparently, according to the Avanti West Coast Customer Experience Director, Catherine O'Brien, nothing like this has been seen on the UK railways. We're incredibly proud of this unique train and who it represents. But as far as I can tell, it only represents people of ethnic minority and no one white, even though the vast majority of people in this country is white. So how is it diverse?
Well, if they wanted to accurately represent the train-going journey in the UK, they'd have a bunch of bored people standing around in business suits trying to get to work because the train hasn't showed up. Because if they've spent any time on a platform in the last 3 years, they'd know that anything as mild as leaves on the line or a shortage of trained staff has prevented you from actually getting to your jobs. You may as well work from home in the nice sunshine, as many people are increasingly doing.
Yeah.
Two things on that. Well, actually three. First of all, yeah, this already exists. Like these ugly corporate Memphis Canva graphics of, women in hijabs and wheelchairs and people with mastectomy scars from trans surgery already plastered along the Elizabeth line, which spoils my commute into the ugly areas of London in the morning. Secondly, the reason this is being done is, as you say, for representation. This is part of Avanti West Coast Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Initiative, and it represents and includes anyone except the settled host majority of this country, who are the majority of people actually buying train tickets, it turns out. But the reason they're doing this, what representation means, and Hannah Pitkin, who's a philosopher, had a good theory of this, it means the making of something present that is otherwise absent. And so
You've lost me.
Well, so what representation means to these people is that they, because they're quite insecure, because all they ever think about is their race and their sexuality and their gender identity, is they think that they aren't prominent enough in public life because people aren't showering them in compliments all the time. So they have to insert their own identity into literally every sphere of life, including the signs of trains. The third element of this, and this is something that you said earlier, is that lots of white liberals are doing this. And that might be the case for their accomplices. But if you look at the videos that are being shown now, if you're watching live or you check it out on Avanti West Coast, thriving, I'm sure, YouTube channel, after...
Have they got a YouTube channel?
Yeah, I'm sure they've got positively tens of subscribers. After decades of diversity, equity and inclusion policy, that's actually not the case. A lot of the executives in this company are black women. And so what we have to realize is, as a theory of mind for sort of we English people who don't think about things in racial categories, there are very tribal minorities who have been imported into the country and who have not assimilated over generations. And so think about these things in racial categories and have been taught to think about these things in racial categories, especially after 2020 and George Floyd and BLM. And they think about them as being constantly under assault by people like you and me because we happen to be of white skin. That's
therefore we're oppressors. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. This is so dangerous. And again, I know I'm much older than you, and I was raised in a society and by a family where colour was totally irrelevant. People didn't talk about it. I think we really got to the point before all this madness started that actually all the polls showed in terms of people's perception of racial differences and in terms of mixed race marriages and things like that. It was very, very obvious that race was a far less big factor in most people's lives. Totally unbothered about it, and then people just started stirring it up. It's just the most extraordinary thing, and it doesn't do anyone any harm. And again, where are all these black, Asian, trans or whatever people who are thinking, oh, I don't think I can get on a train because I don't think it represents me? I mean, I just don't think that's how normal people think.
Well, hopefully they're encouraging lots of young black men, as I've seen on TikTok, in London to actually pay for train fares rather than just bump the barriers and break through and not be chased up by TfL staff.
Now, people are going to get upset about that, genuinely. I tackle people about that all the time at my local tube station, and I have to say, it may just be a matter that in my local tube station, and I think the last 5 occasions, all 5 have been young black men.
Well, it's because they won't be challenged, because if they're challenged, they're called racist. So if you create a society that's permissive of some people behaving badly and other people have to abide by the law, then the people that don't have to abide by the law will behave badly. Shock. As far as the sort of racial mythology that's been going on the last few years, you're right. I was born in 1998 after something happened in 1997, and Tony Blair revolutionised the country. But this has been going on for quite a while. I mean, obviously everyone remembers the Macpherson report calling the police institutionally racist after the murder of Stephen Lawrence. Now we have the Windrush that's treated as if it's Britain's Mayflower, that it rocked up after 1945.
No, but also this bizarre idea, and I've taken people up to task on this idea that people came here to build Britain. People came here to build a better life for themselves and worked very hard and very good. But they weren't doing anything different from what British people already here were doing.
Oh, well, that's weird. I always heard that Hengist and Horsa and Emperor Hadrian were blacks, and that's odd. I thought black people built Stonehenge, Julia. Must not be going to the same history classes. But on Windrush, actually, this Baraka Carberry, the artist in question that's been shown, actually in 2023 made the Windrush bus, thanks to Sadiq Khan, and that bus participated in the Windrush Parade, which is, of course, another public holiday that celebrates the diversity of Britain, without which we would be nothing. At said Windrush Parade, people sexually assaulted police officers, stabbed each other, and actually one police officer was bitten. Now, I think that we could do without this awful behaviour at all of these sort of racial justice celebration events.
Or at any
we
event.
could do without taxpayers spending loads of money on this hideous artwork that says that diversity has always built Britain, and if you don't think that, you're a racist.
Well, exactly. And also, this is the key thing, is that, things like you think, oh, well, it's a private train company. No, they're all subsidised by us. Anything they spend is our money, because that's the end of the day. We haven't even got round to talking about the UK's first apparently trans-identifying judge, Victoria McLeod, who stepped down last year, making a series of controversial statements, planning a human rights challenge to the Supreme Court gender ruling about the basic definition of a woman being biological, or indeed Lush, the retailer. I have to cross the road. I can't bear the smell of that store. Putting trans propaganda leaflets in party bags for children. There is no doubt at all. Just you've got about 10 seconds that an awful lot of people are not taking that Supreme Court ruling lying down.
Yeah, if judges think that men can become women by thought, then just like I don't want someone who believes in flat Earth working for NASA, they shouldn't be making judicial rulings. As far as Lush is concerned, if you put leaflets that convince parents with children with anorexia to engage in liposuction in their party bags, you would be shut down as a business. I think the same rule should apply.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. I know that Claire Paisley is desperate to get in. I promise you we'll come to this in the next half hour. So much more to talk about. And, of course, we're going to talk more about Sergeant Martin Blake, the man, the police armed officer who shot dead the gangster Chris Cabot, now facing misconduct hearing outrageously after being cleared of murder in a criminal charge. Talk about that. Plenty more besides. Tony Blair and Net Zero. Big thanks to Conor Tomlinson. More coming up next. This is Talk.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, now, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. What a lively show it is as well. Coming up to 3 minutes past 11. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Whether you are listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, great to have your company. Great also to have the company Claire Pissell, former Conservative government advisor. Lots I want to talk about with you in the next half hour or so. But coming up, we're going to be talking about more about Sir Tony Blair. He has attacked Keir Starmer's net zero policies, saying they're irrational and doomed to fail, calling for a radical reset. Yay! Talking sense. The former Labour PM says it's wrong for people to be asked to make financial sacrifices and changes in lifestyle when they know that their impact on global emissions is minimal. Finally, someone, senior figure in the Labour movement saying this. Does this mean that the whole net zero thing is all going to be over and even Keir Starmer's going to drop it? We can keep our fingers crossed. Well, maybe not, though, because the government's own advisers, the unelected, unaccountable Climate Change Committee, say progress on reaching net zero is either too slow, has stalled, or is heading in the wrong direction. I mean, I would say that's a good thing, but there we are. Climate Change Committee, though, will never be happy until we're all just sort of locked in our homes with heating that doesn't work. Meanwhile, immigration judges have been accused of potentially breaching the Judicial Code of Conduct. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick has accused them of pushing activist views and backing open borders. Plus, a report by MPs has called for shops and other service providers to be required legally to accept cash, as some customers continue to struggle to pay by phone in places such as car parks. So keep using cash wherever you can, I would suggest. All that coming up, plenty more besides. Obviously, two big breaking news stories since we've come on air, one of which I think mentioned in the news, but I didn't get a chance to get to in the last hour. But Putin, we are told by the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, is, we're told, open to peace and intense work is underway to achieve it. But they say the solution will not come as fast as the US wants it. They say that Moscow must achieve its aims in Ukraine. Well, that's not a good thing, is it? But also apparently in contradiction to that claim that Russia was ready to have direct negotiations with Ukraine over ending the war. That hasn't happened to date. Indeed, there hasn't been much negotiation with Ukraine about ending the war. It's all been over the mineral rights between the US and Ukraine. But that is is certainly the message coming out of the Kremlin today. Other big breaking news we've been discussing, mentioned with a shadow minister and also with a former police officer, actually, who got in touch on the phone lines. You'll remember the case of Chris Cabba, basically a South London gangster who had numerous offences. He'd been in prison previously, actually, for gun offences. Caught just a week before his death in 2022 on CCTV, shooting a rival in a packed nightclub in East London. But in September 2022, he was being followed by armed police and he travelled across South London at night when they tried to stop the vehicle. Fearing he would had a weapon, he tried to ram the police, and one police officer in that group of officers, Sergeant Martin Blake, who henceforth will be known as the hero, opened fire. With one shot, he killed Chris Cabba dead. Now, despite the fact you're watching on YouTube, you'll see this picture of a lovely, smiling young man with his life ahead of him. Well, yeah, he probably would have spent most of it in jail anyway. He was a hoodlum, he was a gangster, he was a violent man. The world is a better place with him out of it, in my view. The Sergeant Martin Blake is an absolute hero. Nevertheless, he outrageously faced murder charges. He even was formally named by the courts, even though, of course, risk to his family from the South London gang, of which Chris Cabba was a member. Well, Sergeant Martin Blake was found not guilty by a jury after just 3 hours, after a lengthy trial. Now, though, it's been revealed this morning that the IPCC, the body that oversees police complaints, are now putting him forward to a gross misconduct disciplinary hearing, and he could face the sack. The evidential, or the probability, the judgment on which he will be found guilty or not guilty of misconduct is very different from that for a criminal charge. So it's not beyond reasonable doubt. It's more based on whether or not his honest but mistaken belief that Chris Cabba was a risk was also reasonable. I would say it wasn't a mistaken belief. I think he was absolutely bang to rights, and I want to salute him. And I would love to, seriously, Sergeant Martin Blake or any of his colleagues or friends, I would love to shake your hand and thank you for making my capital city safer. I think it's absolutely outrageous that you're facing this charge. Claire Pearsall, a former Conservative government advisor, she's also a former Home Office advisor, crucially. What do you make of this decision?
I think it's absolutely appalling. I know who I would rather have out there on the street.
With a gun?
With a gun, and it is not the criminal that was Chris Cabba. It's an appalling set of circumstances we find ourselves in, that officers who put their reputation on the line, put their lives on the line to keep us safe, are then told, you could have acted in a better way, this is ridiculous. And it's like, how many people would run towards that level of chaos?
Remember those amazing armed officers, London Bridge attack?
Yeah.
I mean, literally just ran across. I know people who were involved in that, people who were seriously injured, colleagues of mine, former colleagues. And they're the ones who, instead of running away or hiding, they're the ones who got out of a police van and just took those people down. Absolute heroes.
Yeah, they absolutely are, and we should be celebrating that, and we should be putting them on a pedestal. Now, if he was found to have been guilty of criminal charges, then absolutely have the book thrown at you, but he wasn't.
But there was just there was no good reason to even bring those charges in the first place. I thought it was an outrage. No, and I completely understand, certainly after he was named, how many Met officers, armed officers around the country, just largely they are in the Met, put their weapons down. You go through a lot of training, you've got a lot of stress, and you don't get paid anything extra. But I mean, if I don't know why any officer right now in this country is willing to carry a weapon. No, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't all just down their weapons today.
I wouldn't blame
because
them.
You actually do the job we're asking you at great risk to yourself to do. If you actually do that job, you will then go through this for the next few years. Your family at risk, you at risk, your job, your lifestyle, your life, your mortgage. It's just untenable. I think it's absolutely appalling. I mean, they should be ashamed themselves. There is no reason to believe this was like a personal issue. There's some talk about how he opened fire in anger. Well, I'd be pretty sodding angry if a gun convicted gangster was ramming his car at me late at night. I'm sorry. Don't ram your. Don't be a gangster. Don't get done for gun crime. Don't ram your car at police officers when they're trying to stop you. I have found this has always worked for not getting shot by the police. It's worked really well in my life. I don't know how it's worked for everyone else, but it's worked well for me over the years.
But have you noticed that we've had the sanitised saintly photograph of
every time? Well, we're using
Chris Cabba.
Can we find another photo of Chris Cabba looking like Chris Cabba was actually in real life? Because we've got this photo, this lovely young man.
Exactly.
Well, as a former copper Chris called up, what was he? He was an aspiring architect. Was he my big backside.
Indeed.
Look at him. Oh, he's lovely. Money. Oh,
And then
honey wouldn't melt in his mouth.
And then poor Sergeant Blake. We're not allowed to speak to him, see him. He's not allowed to.
We shouldn't even know his name.
We shouldn't know his name. And his family are probably in danger again from these criminal gangs who want to take revenge. Just what do we do with these people?
This country is absolutely
wrong
insane.
way round.
Seriously, I mean, genuinely. We know the Met Chief, Mark Rowley. He said, he was very defensive of him after he was acquitted, and saying how hard it was for armed police officers. But I mean, again, it just carries on. Look, we're going to talk to former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector Mike Neville about this in a few moments. Let's go back also to Tony Blair. We were talking about that a lot earlier. Net zero is doomed to fail and irrational. What do you make of the Tony Blair Institute, this forward by a report by his institute, giving such criticism to a key plank of government policy, indeed government economic and energy policy as well?
I rarely agree with anything that comes out of the Tony Blair Institute. I find it to be relatively pointless, a very expensive experiment. I don't like it. However, on this, I do believe he's right. He's not criticising net zero as a concept. He's criticising...
No, he thinks if there's climate change is a problem, well, we need to deal with it. He still says that.
But he is critical of what the government is or isn't doing in the meantime. So I think that Sir Keir Starmer will not welcome this ahead of local elections. He will not welcome this full stop because he doesn't like to be questioned, and he's going to go into reverse ferret mode at any point, I reckon.
Well, it's interesting. One of our callers, Andrew, he reckoned that there's been a reshuffle after the local elections. There's the final day of campaigning. Labour not expected to do well. But a lot of the story is going to be Reform doing well, but also the Tories not doing well. Yeah. Because most of the seats that are being fought around the country are actually Tory-held seats from this sort of high watermark in 2021. So I think there are lots of ways you can say, oh, look, we're a new government, of course. I don't see Ed Miliband going that quickly.
I don't see him going that quickly. I don't see there'll be a reshuffle that quickly either. I think it'll happen more in the summer so that it doesn't look like a panicked reaction to something, which is never what you want when you're in government. You don't want
it always shows
to
weakness.
Look like
but
that.
again, why is Ed Miliband the problem? I keep saying this. It's very easy to criticise him, but Ed Miliband's not the problem. The manifesto was written by Keir Starmer's people. He appointed Ed Miliband. The policy is Keir Starmer's policy. So when people say, oh, an education secretary won't spend money on this or do this. Sorry, government is so centralised now. Nothing happens and no money is spent on anything unless the Prime Minister wants it to happen. So is this a Keir Starmer problem, not an Ed Miliband problem?
Well, it will always be the Prime Minister's fault because they are the ones who are leading that party and leading the government. I'm
still fascinated. It's the same for me as the trans women thing as well, trans women and women thing. Do these people actually believe this stuff? Because as I was tweeting last night when I saw this, it's not possible to know any facts at all about any of this and actually still think that net zero is either A, achievable, B, desirable, C, affordable, because it's none of those things. And it's very good that someone, he's a serious figure still, Tony Blair, still very influential, has said this. And he says, well, people are afraid of being called a climate denier. Well, yeah, I've been called that for years. I'm pretty sure the reason I don't get invited back on Question Time, I think, is because the last time I was on, I was a climate denier. And I genuinely, I said to him, I defy you to find a single fact that I stated that was not provably true. And by the way, in an IPCC report, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, people haven't read this stuff. They literally make up stuff. They make up their hysterical facts. But this at the same time as the Climate Change Committee, the official, unaccountable, unelected quango that advises the government. And thanks to wonderful, wonderful St. Theresa May, who's the worst Prime Minister we've ever had, who tried to scupper Brexit and basically put net zero into law. They're saying the government's not doing enough to take climate change seriously. This all, by the way, after these best part of 24-hour blackouts across Spain and Portugal and small parts of France as well. And it is not, it's not people like me saying it. Energy experts and also the people who run the electricity grid in Spain saying it wasn't a freak weather event. It wasn't a cyber attack. It was most likely a problem with their solar farms and this intermittent supply of electricity that basically busts the grid. And this is a problem with unreliable, renewable fuel.
And it irritates me beyond belief that we see solar as the answer to all of the problems when it isn't. We're in England. Let's have a look at what the weather's going to be like.
We have some of the least amount of sun.
It's nice currently.
Yeah.
but next week probably not so much. And what can you do to store this energy? Oh, you're going to have massive battery sites. Well, then they're a problem to the environment because they leach into the water table.
But also
as well.
that again,
it doesn't work.
The technology doesn't exist, and everyone says, well, it will. Well, okay, and when it does.
Yeah,
we can incorporate it. You cannot base your energy policy, which includes also your industrial policy, your economic policy, your defence policy. It's all, cost of living, everything is completely dependent on our energy policy. This is the grassroots of everything. This is absolutely there. It's foundational stone. You cannot have a policy based on technology that doesn't sodding exist yet. If and when it does, I'm sure we will all move to that super duper new, clean, reliable, renewable energy, and it'll be brilliant. And I'll be celebrating it as much as anybody. But until it exists, no. I mean, I'd love to hear from you on this. I mean, I'd love to hear from you on all of the topics we're talking about today. But what do you make of what Tony Blair had to say? Why do you think he said it now, day before the local elections? Not very helpful for his big mates, Keir Starmer and Ed Miliband. What's your reaction? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Don't forget, of course, that calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. X is free, and so is leaving a message on our YouTube page as well. I will get to some more of those messages. Also, I'd love to hear from you about Sergeant Blake, Martin Blake, being charged with gross misconduct over the killing. The very, very good killing of gangster Chris Cabba. Love to hear your thoughts on that. Let's also talk about, we mentioned the local elections, but talking about, the difficulty campaigning and the concerns a lot of MPs have. We touched on this with a guest earlier, but this Belfast rap trio, never heard of them. Let's all stop pretending anyone had heard of them at our age. Kneecap, never heard of them. Anyway, they've had a gig cancelled at the Eden Project. They're now facing possible police investigation, possible criminal charges. And again, I don't see how they couldn't face criminal charges given what they have said is on record, on video, is very, very clear. Basically saying that, only good Tory MP is a dead MP. Literally saying, kill your MP. This, by the way, after 2 MPs have been murdered, David Amos and Joe Cox. Certainly we've had reaction from their families over that in recent years. But also backing Hezbollah and Hamas, 2 proscribed terrorist organisations. These are clear, blatant crimes. Incitement to violence, support for proscribed terrorist organisations. And yet, people have been currently behind bars for saying and doing less in relation to the Southport attacks, but now people saying it's a free speech issue. No, your free speech doesn't extend to inciting violence, does it?
No, it really doesn't. And there was an urgent question in the chamber of the House of Commons yesterday, and I listened to it because I thought it would be really interesting because I had no knowledge of the band to begin with. But I have seen and read what it was they've put out. And the most interesting people to listen to on yesterday's debate were the Northern Irish MPs, who say, look at what we've had to deal with the IRA. This is absolutely no better. These people should be in prison for what they're doing. All they needed to do was run around in a balaclava.
I don't know whether prison. I think certainly prosecuted. I don't know whether. I'm kind of largely against people going to prison if they haven't actually. They weren't standing there in front of an MP going, kill him, kill him, kill him. I'm in favour.
It's just as bad. This is just
as bad. It's not just, because words aren't as bad as actions. I do think we need to get to grips with that. I think they should be prosecuted. I think they have committed criminal acts. Yeah, I'm just not entirely sure that I think you need to put people behind bars for that. I think if they carried on doing it, repeat offences, I think I think they do need locking up because I don't think they're going to pay any attention. What are we going to do to them? Where are we going to ban them from exactly? Because I don't want people banned. We spoke to Kevin Hollinrake, Tory MP, about it. I don't want people banned. I think people have a right. They've got every right to go and play gigs and earn their livelihood. But the question is whether people want to go to see a band. I don't think venues should ban them. I think there's an issue of do they face police prosecution. But again, it's very clear what they've done. I don't think the evidence balancing, is questioned, and that it's just whether or not people think that meets the level of criminal charge. It seems to me to be blatantly obvious that it does, in the same way that some of the banners at these pro-Hamas marches do the same as well. Just really quickly, I just want to mention one other story. Shops could be banned from refusing to take coins and notes as people increasingly move to a cashless society. Many shops just refusing to say anything. I just get planes now. Basically, we're cashless. Lots of places are cashless. I have to say, I don't see the justification for that. Coins are legal, notes are legal at tender, but it is somehow allowed for companies, businesses and shops to say, no, we don't take... we don't take any cash. But this new report from a group of MPs is saying that actually it should be required that you are allowed to...
This is legal tender in the United Kingdom. How can you say that you can't use it to pay for services or food or whatever it is that you want to pay for by cash? And I think we've seen with Spain, that should be a lesson to us.
When there's a blackout.
When there's a blackout, you can't make any payments whatsoever.
I always feel like you should just have cash just in case.
Yeah,
I've done
do
too
have
much
some at home.
travelling abroad and didn't work out. So well, my bag was stolen, but there we are. Not insured cash, apparently. There we are. Anyway, lots more coming up. Up next, actually, I'll ask that question. Mike Neville, he's a former Met DCI, about the just extraordinary decision of the authorities to bring a gross misconduct disciplinary hearing against Sergeant Martin Blake, the man the police officer who shot dead gangster Chris Cabba, and was actually exonerated by a jury of a murder charge. We'll talk about that with him up next. This is Talk.
Blair is now listening to and agreeing with Reform UK policy, as are an increasing number of people, about the madness of net stupid zero. And let's just remind ourselves, I mean, we've seen huge blackouts across southern Europe, in Spain and Portugal, and it may well be that that's triggered Tony Blair to say what he's just said. But people should be under no illusion, and there's a sort of conspiracy of silence. Oh my gosh, what's happened? And no one wants to admit the truth, which is that it's net zero.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Let's talk right now about more about the Met police officer, Sergeant Martin Blake. He was cleared of murdering the gangster Chris Cabba in 2022 in a police stop, but he's now been accused of a gross misconduct offence, and he now faces a disciplinary hearing which could lead to him being dismissed as a Met officer. Let's talk to Mike Neville. He's a former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector and joins us now. Good morning to you, Mike. Thank you for joining us. I mean, this is just the most outrageous decision by the IPCC, is it not?
You can absolutely sense it in the public already, can't you? And as you've identified, we've seen the nicey picture of Chris Cabba, that lovely family man who beat up his girlfriend and was a drug-dealing gangster. And what we ask here, Julie, we ask men and women to go out every day armed with weapons. We ask officers as well to go out and drive cars really fast in dangerous circumstances to keep people safe, to keep the public safe. And then when they have to take action, then they get charged with murder. When it takes the jury a matter of minutes to find them not guilty, then the ILPC thinks it can have another bite of the cherry and charge them with discipline offences.
I know, and that's the thing. I don't understand what the point of that is. I mean, it was 3 hours for the jury, but again, time to go in the jury, people introduce themselves and then have a bit of lunch and then have their decision. That is a very, very, very quick verdict on a very complicated case. But this is the thing. We understand there are going to be investigations every time that a firearm is discharged, and quite rightly, we don't want guns used with impunity. But the evidence, there was simply no evidence of any wrongdoing in this case. We're talking about a man known as someone who had used a gun. There's CCTV of him gunning down another gangster in a nightclub just a week earlier. He'd already got convictions and served time in prison for gun offences. He was part of this violent gang. He was being followed at night. They decided to stop him. He was revving his engine and trying to ram his car at the police. The idea that this was, a shot that was let out in anger and was totally unnecessary, it was absurd from word go, wasn't it?
Absolutely absurd, because the offence of murder, it requires you to have malice aforethought, that you've actually planned, thought about what you're doing. Sergeant Blake had a split second to make a decision. And as you've seen, a car is more deadly sometimes than a gun. And I just think the public will see this once again as the police being under attack, when the police get rightly criticised about things, about not solving enough crime, not being on patrol enough. But here we had dedicated officers who were keeping Londoners safe, fighting gangsters, and this is the reward. They get more worry. How much worry can they heap upon this officer's head, Sergeant Blake, and his wife and children? And remember the outrageousness where that judge said, "Oh, we'll let his name out because we don't believe there'll be any threats." And then suddenly there's a 20 grand contract on his life. These people are disgrace. And Julie, one thing I noticed, I read the ILPC statement on this, and the director,
the Independent Office for Police Conduct. I should clarify.
And she said, this will be of great interest to the black community.
What?
Almost saying to black people that we know that you side with vicious gangsters because of the same colour skin. It's absolutely
it's an absolute insult. Yeah, and it was exactly the same thing with Mark Duggan in 2011, which sparked, of course, those horrific London riots as well. And again, I remember saying, I was on a rival station at the time and saying, I'm glad he's dead. Again, another wrong-un who was a danger to the public, a danger to the police, who was shot dead in the right circumstances. Police did nothing wrong. Oh, it's a white officer, it's a black man. There must be something afoot. Look, now you mentioned that photo, Chris Cabba, and I just said to producers, I'm so fed up of seeing that picture of him. We got this picture of Chris Cabba. Oh, smiling young man, aspiring architect. Apparently, wouldn't hurt a fly. Lovely guy, despite his long string of criminal offences. I've said, can you dig out another photo that's a bit more accurate? Let's have another photo of him for you watching on YouTube. This is him in a drill video. This is him not smiling in a t-shirt, but now he's got a cap on. He's actually, we've had to blur it out. He's got two fingers up at the camera, wearing a black hoodie. Looks a little bit more like the gangster he actually was, rather than the butter wouldn't melt in my mouth little mummy's boy that everyone pretended he was. But this is the thing. There are some black community activists who play along with this narrative, and that's a sodding insult to black law-abiding citizens of this country too.
I mean, these men are more of a threat to black people than anything else. The idea of these white racist thugs. I mean, the tragedy of Stephen Lawrence, of course, is that people seized on it because it fitted their agenda. The vast majority of young black men are killed by other young black men. And what's happened? Can you imagine being the officer now who is suddenly confronted with a black suspect who he believes he's armed? They pull out that weapon, and then they hesitate, because if I shoot this person, you can shoot white people and no one really bothers about that. But if you shoot a black person, there's everybody on top of you, and that officer hesitates. That officer might be killed. Members of the public might be killed because of the hesitation. And all this is truly wicked. undermines the police, who are really in this circumstance. You know, I come on here and criticise the police, and rightly so for some of the things they do. However, Sergeant Blake did his duty. He was there, took a split-second decision that made us all safer.
Exactly.
He's made the community safer.
Exactly.
And I'm a religious man. Those who live by the sword, Julia, will die by the sword. And that's what's happened to Cameron.
Yeah, don't be a gun-toting gangster and a wife beater and there's a long string of convictions, and when you get stopped by the police, don't ram your car at the police. You'll find it much more likely you don't get shot by the police. Funny that, works for everyone else. But this is the trouble with this disciplinary offence, this misconduct hearing, is it's based on the civil test rather than the criminal test. So it's more on sort of balanced probabilities, not reasonable doubt. But also it states that an honest but mistaken belief must also be reasonable. Now, this is the thing. In those split-second moments, in the dark, people shouting, lots of noise, fear, you know, what might seem reasonable in a court or a disciplinary hearing in the cold light of day is very different from what feels reasonable at that moment. So a lot of the time these judgments are just it's impossible for us to make. Like, what did he feel at that moment? Now, the jury in the case that was brought last October, and I think it's outrageous they were asked to even look at this case of murder. I agree with you on that. But they found him not guilty. But it was interesting that Sir Mark Rowley, the Met Commissioner, after that acquittal, he said he feared that police being charged in these situations was crushing the spirit of good officers. And certainly when Sergeant Blake was named by the judge, an awful lot of armed police officers downed their weapons and refused to actually carry weapons because, you know, that your life is basically over the moment you discharge your weapon. But you know as well as I do, weapons are discharged a handful of times a year, despite thousands upon thousands of scenes where armed officers are called to the scene and potentially could use their weapons. There's no question at all police are not trigger happy in this country. It's absolute nonsense that anyone would think that they are. But why would anyone agree to be an armed officer in this country anymore? Do you not expect that if this goes ahead, every armed officer in this country is going to hand their weapon in and say, no, thank you?
Julia, what needs to happen is that the members who are sitting on this panel need to go to the firearms range, and then the targets need to flick up suddenly and say, right, would you shoot it, yes or no? And then we'll see, won't we? Then we'll see what this is. Because these are often, you know, senior police officers who spent the time getting promoted, or they're lawyers who sit there who take 2 years to make a decision. Well, let's see it. Let's see you make a decision in a split second. We've all seen those police films where they're walking around the range and suddenly something shoots out, a target shoots out. Is it a woman with a baby or is it a man with a gun? Let them have a go at that. Yeah. And then they can sit in judgment of Sergeant Blake. But until then, I suggest they can't at all.
Absolutely. Mike Neville, couldn't agree with you more. Former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector. Love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. Also, of course, on Tony Blair, Net Zero and everything else. But Claire Pearsall, as a former Home Office Special Advisor, what do you think the current Home Secretary would be making of this?
I think she's probably going to be hiding away under a desk because this is yet another decision.
Can't get involved. Yeah.
Exactly. And she's going to have to make a decision. She's going to have to come down on the side of the police officer. She should. I hope she does, and I hope she's listening. Because she needs to do this quickly. Yeah. And
we're still getting prosecutions of like police and soldiers, you know, for Iraq and Northern Ireland and things, but impunity for anybody who acted against them. I'm not saying every police officer is innocent and 100% and you know white and white. No one's saying that, but I just do not understand how we can expect people to carry weapons and act in those circumstances to keep themselves and the public safe, and then just come down on them like this. It just seems outrageous. As I said, Sergeant Martin Blake, come here, come to the studio. I will shake your hand and thank you for your job and your service in keeping our country safe. 11:33 is the time. Up next, we're going to talk about, well, inability to keep our country safe from small boat crossings. The official figures now, we knew already, but the official figures now showing 10,000 small boat crossings already this year. Plus, are immigration judges now too politicised and basically are now activists? We'll talk about that up next with Stephen Wolf. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk, the home of common sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Well, let's talk about some common sense on migration now with Stephen Wolfe, who's director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, and joins us once again. Very good morning to you.
A very good morning, Julia.
Oh, you sound very chirpy. Everyone's all happy because of the weather. Imagine what this country would be like if we had this sort of nice, lovely, warm, sunny skies and hot sun. We would just be, well, we wouldn't be British anymore, would we?
Oh, I just find it lovely, Julie. Look, you've got a pink outfit on. I've got pink behind me.
There we are.
And we're feeling in the pink.
In the pink. We are in the pink. Let's get to the small business of ability to control our borders. We already knew this earlier in the week, but officially now the Home Office admitted, there have been 10,000 small boat crossings. It's a record-breaking year. We have surpassed all other years for the number of people who've crossed into this country on those Channel migrant boats from Calais in the first few months of this year. How significant is that, do you think?
Oh, this is hugely significant. As you said, Julia, you look at the four key metrics. We've had 10,198 that have arrived this year. That's up 42% on last year.
It'll already be out of date. There'll be a load more have arrived in the last 24 hours, surely.
Unfortunately, I haven't got a drone from here that's being able to capture them as they're coming through. They've used 179 boats, which again is up on last year. Lovely. Treasury are going to expend about £500 million just on this lot that have arrived so far. And of course, the lovely people smugglers, those generous, kind, wonderful individuals, have made a whopping 70 million just so far this year. The numbers are astounding. The government are still not acting.
And they keep on coming. They certainly need somewhere to live. We see again whether they're in hostels, and that's a massive, or hotels, massive issue for lots of local people, especially in small towns and villages where they're taking over, the only local hotel. But when they're put into local accommodation, a huge expense to the taxpayer. 5-year guaranteed contracts Serco been offering local landlords, often paying twice the amount that local families are expecting to pay, making it impossible for local families to take those properties.
Yes, unfortunately, Serco is one of the 3 companies that have got the major contracts with the Home Office. I've now deemed them the Leech Leviathan, because they are generally taking from taxpayers' money to fill their pockets, to reduce the housing stocks in the poorest areas of the country, to ensure those families who are just about making ends meet will no longer be able to rent a house at all in the areas, just because the government will not have a deterrent. And I think this is where we're going to see a major play with ordinary citizens, Julia, is that they're already fed up. But when they see that their family can no longer afford to live in a house that's going to be filled by a landlord making buckets of cash, then they will know that this is where the government no longer cares for them.
But also the government can talk a good line, and so did the Tories. But actually, when you're putting out 5-year contracts, but also here's the thing. So, Serco promising to pay landlords utility bills, council tax, you name it, all the every single possible cost, and double the rent, what the local market rent is. But they're still making a massive profit. That's all money we're paying for.
That's right. At the moment, I'm doing a little bit of research on Serco and the other companies on the costs and the contracts. I have the contracts now that they've had since 2019. But it does look that the Channel migrants and the whole asylum application is giving somewhere between 10 and 15% of the turnover of Serco. Can you believe that? 10 to 15% of a listed entity is around the cost of taxpayers paying for asylum seekers. So it's not in the interest of Serco to say, stop the boats or stop the gangs.
No.
Actually, they'd love the weather to continue like this.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe that's, let's all put shares in Serco, shall we? Buy shares in them. Let's talk about what Robert Jenrick's had to say. He's made some, really good running on this issue, and on many different issues. But Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick is basically saying that immigration judges are basically potentially breaching the judicial code of conduct for judges, saying that they're advocating highly charged political views. He said the immigration courts, basically, who overrule the Home Office in asylum cases again and again and again, and we've had a litany of those absurd rulings, nearly always involving an absurd claim to Article 8 rights to a family life. He said they've been infiltrated by activist judges. A research compiled by his party show immigration judges have made political remarks about the system they're supposed to be impartial about when they adjudicate. One judge even works for an organisation which provides free weekly advice sessions restrictions for migrants in northern France who are trying to enter Britain illegally by boat. Another has publicly backed calls for changes in immigration law by a charity. I mean, these are, these are judges who are supposed to be above politics, but having clear political views and deciding cases in a way which, frankly, the average voter, whichever political party they support, would not agree with.
No, I agree. As a member of the bar, I am bound by a code of conduct, and judges are exactly the same. And that's why I'm very careful about when I talk about the law, because there are those activists out there that would equally like to silence me and have my license removed for expressing views. But my view has always been very clear. We have one of the best legal systems in the world. We have a system where people genuinely try to help individuals, both with the prosecution, defense, civil courts. But when you get certain individuals who allow their politics to go into their jobs, and in this case, as Robert Jenrick is identifying in judges, then all that's going to do is call into question the whole of our legal system and its fairness. So I think it's right for him to identify those areas. It's also right for the Bar Council and the judiciary to say maybe it's not the case, and let's have a discussion about that. But the most important thing is that people are now losing trust in our judicial system.
Oh, absolutely. Again, I'm a white middle-class woman. I was raised to, I have not got any sort of historical issues with the justice system. I no longer trust the justice system. I no longer trust the police to be impartial now. I mean, and the CPS to be impartial. This is a really big issue. If vast majority of people in this country, have never had any sort of brushes with the law. Was that shoplifting incident when I was 15? But apart from that, but genuinely, just feeling like you're a law-abiding citizen, if you don't feel that the law is on your side, that is very, very dangerous.
It is dangerous, and this is one of the aspects about our common law system, our system of politics, which means that we have to get a handle on this. And it can't be right just because we're lawyers to turn around and say, oh, well, we are lawyers, therefore we're fair and we don't do anything wrong. No, you have to look at ourselves introspectively as well. And we have to analyse our system, our procedures and rules. And I think it's right that politics and politicians should identify if they feel that that is wrong. And Robert Jenrick is right to identify this. Let's see that we hope that we in the legal professions and the judiciary can come to a conclusion and say, OK, let's solve this somehow.
But there's no question at all. I mean, Rishi Sunak promised to stop the boats. Keir Starmer said he would smash the gangs. Neither have managed it. If things are getting worse, not better. This is still a massive issue for voters, as it has been in America. It was a key part of Donald Trump's message. He managed to actually, he's cut illegal entry on the Mexican border to the US by 95%. Mass deportations, like a lot of people getting up in arms about that. I do not understand why anyone's got a problem with people who are not here legally being deported. I think that's a very strange thing to not support. But there's no doubt at all this is a big issue. It's going to continue to be a big issue. It's helping to boost the vote for reform. It's undermined a lot of the votes for support for the Tories. But certainly even Labour, Keir Starmer is facing a lot of pressure from his own backbench MPs, particularly those in the red wall seats.
Yes, he's got pressure from two sides, hasn't he? On the one side, he's got those in the red wall who said, well, look, we got in and now it's clear that our policies are failing, and they're putting out video after video saying, look, we are negotiating with Europe. We've sent 25,000 people back on deportations. No, they haven't. These are voluntary issues from people who've overstayed on their visas. But look at us, we're grand, we're great, because they know they are losing. On the other side, though, they have the migrants welcome those like the Liberal Democrats who want to turn around and say, let's give 4 million people the vote. You've got them pressurising, saying, don't be racist, don't be like Reform.
Yeah, it's just an extraordinary...
Not saying that Reform is racist, by the way, but
that's their argument they give, indeed. Stephen Wolfe, always good to talk to you, Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Claire Pearsall, your response to that?
Yeah, no, I think Stephen's absolutely right. Is that there are so many different sides that Keir Starmer is being hit on with when it comes to migration. He just can't win.
But
what
I'd
he really
like to think
is let everyone in, but...
Yeah, but I'd like to think, would you not understand that there is an issue? Again, it's not a good idea to have a load of people arriving on your shores you can't get rid of. And if you can't get rid of them, then there's a problem with your system. You need to change your system.
But that would mean he'd have to come down on one side of an argument or another. And at the moment, he likes to just straddle that fence and put splinters there.
You make a fair point. Well, someone who's definitely come down on one side or the other, well, sort of. Well, I say definitely, sort of. Undermined it already is Tony Blair with that forward. He's written ahead of a report by the Tony Blair Institute saying basically that net zero is doomed to fail and is irrational, basically because the policy is just just simply don't match the reality. But I want to know what your thoughts are on that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Martin has done just that. He's in Cambridge. Hello, Martin.
Hello there, Julie.
Hello. Again, everyone's chirpy today.
Well, yes, I was thinking of the goddess of daytime radio.
Oh, goddess now. I've gone from queen to empress to... I'm liking goddess.
You were doyenne last time, but anyway, yeah. It was about Tony Blair, really. I mean, I just did some Googling. In 1996, the population was 94% white British. Housing was affordable. We had full employment. Government debt was 37%. There was no immigration to count, really. It was about 40,000 a year. We were energy independent. The economy was booming, as was the high streets. Yeah. Then Tony Blair came along. And he introduced the Supreme Court, Human Rights Act, open borders, Bank of England independence, government debt doubles, 50% of the kids go to university and get brainwashed by left-wing ideology. It's all of this pins back to him.
That's
Julia.
Interesting. I mean, there were lots of other things happening at the same time. But yeah, certainly 100% Tony Blair was responsible for the mad mass immigration policy. But that said, the Tories were in power for 14 years and made it worse, not better, after promising, as I say, laughably, to get it back to the net tens of thousands.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the reason why they did what they did was because they wanted to stay in power. And politicians will say anything and do anything to stay in power. So they basically, the narrative at the time was, in all the mainstream media and everything, if you criticise mass immigration, then you were a racist and a bigot.
Yeah, and immigration is good for the economy, which, as now we know, well, if it was, then we'd have had a booming economy the last 20 years, wouldn't we? Martin, do you think that Keir Starmer's going to change direction at all as a result of this intervention by Tony Blair? Do you think he kind of knew in advance this was going to happen?
Yes, as he's an empty vessel and a vacuous non-entity, then he'll do whatever he needs to do to stay in power. So Miliband will get thrown under the bus, probably in the summer, and I think Rachel Reeves will probably go as well. And
I think they'll wait for her to do an autumn budget and take the hit for that as well.
Absolutely, and I think he'll do anything or say anything. I mean, the bloke is a compulsive liar. I mean, you can't lie straight in bed. I mean, every week in House of Parliament, how he gets away with it, Blair. Boris got hung over the coals because he said over a piece of cake, and Starmer lies every week. How is that absolutely possible in our parliamentary democracy that nobody can hold that man to account?
Well, I can tell you, I sat in PMQs. My seat was in the lobby was virtually opposite the Prime Minister. I've never seen a Prime Minister answer a question. Every now and then, when a Prime Minister did, I mean, really, on the odd chance they'd answer one yes or no, and everyone would go, "Oh, what happened then? Someone answered a question." Martin, I mean, you got that off your chest. Go and have another few lovely hours of the sunshine. Thank you very much. 11:48 is the time. Up next, we're going to talk about the warning about us going to a cashless society, or should we insist that stores and other providers are required to allow us to pay with notes and coins? This is Talk, the home of common sense.
14,000 majority just last July.
Yeah.
Was what the Mike Ainsbury managed to get, and that has certainly been overturned, and it looks like it will be enough, and Reform are running ahead. It's hard to tell with polls on the local level, small numbers of course, but it does look like they're going to take that. And also the Doncaster mayoral election, 10,000 votes majority 4 years ago for the Labour candidate, and it's looking again like Reform are on track to take that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:51 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk about, well, how you pay for things, because increasingly when you go to the shop or do anything at all these days, you're asked to pay by card, which is all very well unless you get a blackout like Spain or Portugal, and then none of that works. Well, a new report by the Treasury Committee has suggested that actually we should have laws requiring shops to have to agree to take coins and notes, because increasingly people are struggling to be able to use only cards. Let's talk about this with the Payment Choice Alliance's chair, Ron Del Nevo, who joins us. Good morning to you, Ron.
Good morning, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. I mean, for a lot of us, just get your card out, or indeed your phone and Apple Pay, all nice and easy. Click, click, done, job done. Thank you very much. But there are certainly times when you need to have cash. But increasingly, service providers are just saying, no, you can't pay with cash. Whether it's paying in a car park, whether it's buying stuff in a store, they just say, no, we'll only take cards. Now, is that currently legal for them to say that?
Oh, it's currently legal because we're one of the few countries who haven't introduced measures to make it illegal to refuse cash, and that needs to change.
I just find it very strange, because if it's legal tender, I remember there's like these people who are sort of angry with their local supermarket or bank, and they go, right, I'm taking £200 worth of £2 coins in to pay for something, but it's legal tender and you can't do anything about it. But so if you go to a store and you say, I've only got cash, and they say, well, it can only be by card, they can legally stop you from taking the item and saying, but I've left you, a tenner to pay for it.
Well, the sticklers for the rules, like Bank of England, will say that it's a debt settlement matter. So basically, if you went into a restaurant that said we don't accept cash, and you ate the meal and then said, I must be able to pay in cash, if they don't accept your cash, then you don't have to pay for the meal, because basically you've offered to settle the debt in
with
cash.
Legal tender. Yeah,
exactly. But we don't want to get into that situation. It's ridiculous that the public would have to behave in that way. All of the countries around us in Europe, France, Spain, now the Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, and so on, they've already brought in laws to protect the public's right to use cash. And why should the British public be second-class citizens?
Why does that matter? Why should we protect the use of cash?
Well, because, for one thing, without cash, everything gets more expensive. Visa and MasterCard to American card schemes already take $1 billion a year out of the UK economy because they impose those charges on our retailers, which are then passed on to the public. Yeah. So that matters. Also, in a situation where cash didn't exist, all of those charges would go up, and small retailers wouldn't be able to negotiate good deals because they never get good deals.
I have to say, if I'm going to a big supermarket or buying a big item, obviously if you're buying stuff online, I'll use a credit card. But actually, a lot of the time, if I'm going to a local corner store or dry cleaners, I do try and pay in cash. And again, up to them what they do in terms of taking. But a lot of retailers, they actually like to take things by card because they've got a record of every transaction. They don't have to worry with the banking of the money. People fiddling the till and all of that. There's a reason why things were, £1.99, not £2. So you had to open the till and give the penny change. So a lot of retailers, even though they've got those extra charges, as you say, they could pass on to customers, they prefer it to be cashless because it's less bother for them, isn't it?
Well, the biggest retailers in the country still love cash, like Tesco. They love cash. And the bottom line is that in the end, those retailers understand that costs will go up if cash disappears. Yeah. Also, the fact is that, retailers who only accept cards and digital are excluding millions of people. Yeah. And that can't be right. 4 million people in this country don't have smartphones. How can you use an app if you don't have a smartphone? Yeah. We've got 16 million people disabled in this country in some shape or form. Many of them can't use the new technology. 4 million people use it living in abusive households. They can escape using cash, not using monitored cards and digital.
Very good point.
There are all sorts of reasons why we should have cash.
And for youngsters as well. And also, I think most people would agree, much easier to budget when you're talking about money. I remember the days, when I was waitressing and you have your cash, you know how much money you've got, and that's going on rent, and that's going on the liquor, but that's how much money you've got. And you can physically see it, like I've only got 20 quid left, so that's all I'll spend. Whereas on the card, so easy to go click, click, click. And as we see, even in the pub, when, a pint is whatever it is these days, I'm a wine drinker, you don't notice it so much because you're not having to get, 20 quid note out of your pocket.
That's a very good point. I mean, I'm sure you got a lot of tips, Julia, when you were
very good
serving people. But whether they get tips or not, the reality is that you can budget. When I was a trustee of Citizens Advice, we had people come in asking, could we have our contactless switched off because we're just waving the things, forgetting that we're really spending money. But apparently 16 million people in this country budget using cash. Are we saying we're going to impose cashless and they're forced to get into debt because they can't control their expenditure? Really, we just need a basic right to use cash. And most retailers understand the benefit of that. And certainly the public understand the benefit.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's give the public what they want for a change.
I tell you what, I was also very, very worried about. I was probably more concerned about this after what happened in Canada with the truckers in those lockdown protests, when the Canadian government basically turned off people's bank accounts for making payments, some online to charities supporting those truckers. And the ability of governments to control your bank account was really quite terrifying.
But the most controlling government in the world, arguably, are the Chinese government. They have massive ability to socially score you, switch off, and so on. But interestingly, in China, accepting cash is a law. If businesses don't accept cash, they get fined by the People's Bank in China, even though the government is controlling people through social media and so on. So
you want to buy your pangolin in the wet market, you got to pay with cash. Ron's on there, though. Really good to talk to you. Thank you so much. He's chair of the Payments Choice Alliance. Thank you very much. And again, it's these things, not a problem. What's the big issue until it's an issue? And again, I discovered it, during around the lockdown time when my 14-year-old, she didn't have a bank account. She didn't need a bank account at 14. So she couldn't buy anything. She had to borrow money off friends because everything had to be paid for by card or because of COVID, But also after that, what happened with the truckers in Canada and bank accounts, but also what's happened in Spain and Portugal with the blackouts.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I have a real problem with is all the parking apps where you have to pay online through this different app. I live in the countryside. Signal isn't great sometimes. You can go somewhere, you have no signal, you have to walk out and you risk getting a ticket.
Put some coins in.
Exactly. Put some coins in, get a ticket, put it on my dashboard,
But this is the thing, all this tech, it can actually make things much easier, it can actually really improve things, but only if it works.
Yes.
And the trouble is, some of the time it doesn't work, whereas kind of putting coins in, it can actually be much simpler. And again, it just seems to me, people having a record of how you're spending your money, and it makes, Rod makes the point about, say people leaving abusive relationships, wanting to be able to have a way of spending money without, an abusive partner knowing what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we always say that people should have an escape fund.
Yeah.
But you can't do that in a bank account, which is going to be controlled by a partner.
Absolutely,
so you need it in cash.
Really interesting. Love to hear your thoughts on that and all the things we're talking about. 0344 499 1000. Claire Pearcell staying with us. I'm going to have to take a quick break for the news. Then we're going to be talking to the former Green Party leader, Baroness Natalie Bennett, about what Tony Blair has had to say. I think it might get a bit lively. You probably don't want to miss that. Take more of your calls as well. This is Talk. We are, of course, the home of common sense.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. This is Talk, the home of common sense, and me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Everyone's chirpy today because the weather is so nice. Got a whole week of good weather heading into the bank holiday, of course, but don't worry, it'll be rotten by the bank holiday Monday. It's what we do in Britain, and we wouldn't want it any other way, would we? Anyway, joining me still today, former Conservative Government Advisor Claire Pearsall. Thank you very much indeed to you. We've talked about an awful lot today, and we're going to be talking about this next topic with the former Green Party leader, Baroness Natalie Bennett, in just a moment. But Sir Tony Blair, has attacked Keir Starmer's net zero policies. He says they're irrational and doomed to fail. He's called for a radical reset. The former Labour PM says it is wrong for people to be asked to make financial sacrifices and changes in their lifestyle when they know that their impact on global emissions is minimal. Amazing! A Labour politician saying what, most of us have been, paid any attention, have been saying for some years. Meanwhile, of course, the Climate Change Committee, the government's own they're called independent advisors, the unelected and unaccountable Climate Change Committee. They say progress on reaching net zero by the government in the last few years has been either too slow, has stalled, or is heading in the wrong direction. So that's good news. Meanwhile, Russia's former Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev has warned that NATO's newest members, Sweden and Finland, could be hit by nuclear revenge strikes. Meanwhile, Europe would struggle to collectively muster even 25,000 troops between them to be part of a deterrence force in Ukraine because its armies are undermined and underfunded. Meanwhile, we've had a statement from the Kremlin today saying that Moscow must achieve its aims in Ukraine, but also said that Russia is ready to have direct negotiations with Ukraine over ending the war. I imagine they'll be putting an awful lot of those provisos they've already put on in contact with the United States as well. Also, it's that time of the week again. PMQs is back. It's already started. Usual rules apply. Peter Cardwell is watching it, so we don't have to. He'll bring us the highlights later. A very lively one last week we actually took live, unusually. Over the we knew that Kemi Badenoch would be going over the Supreme Court challenge, and very lively it was too, but we'll get the highlights of that coming up. Claire Pearsall is still here, former Conservative Government Advisor, as I say. We've been talking a lot about net zero. We're also talking a lot about Chris Cabba. He is the gangster who was killed by Sergeant Martin Blake. Sergeant Martin Blake was cleared of his murder last October, outrageously, I think, charged with his murder when it was completely, absolutely bang to rights killing of a man who was a risk to the public and risk to police officers at that moment. He is now facing a misconduct disciplinary hearing as well. Do you think that's likely to be brought up at PMQs?
I wouldn't have thought so. I think because this is one of those cases, A, it's just broken, and B, this is now for the IOPC to go through. I don't think that'll come up. I think net zero is going to be the main attraction today, and Kemi Badenoch is pretty strong on net zero and how awful it is.
She's got 6 questions, but interestingly, there's a sort of circular thing, so the Lib Dems get 2, yes, and then another budget depending on but Reform a guaranteed one, when assuming Nigel Farage, the leader, will be asking a question himself as well. And again, he's already welcomed this thing from the statement from Tony Blair, hasn't he? So
he certainly has. So I think that is going to be interesting to watch. Well, not us, but for Peter Cardwell to watch.
Then we'll watch it.
Yes, to see that. And I think that Sir Keir Starmer's got to come up with some actual answers as to what his views on net zero are, because he can't get away with blaming 14 years of Tory rule and all the rest of it. You can't use those lines when it's something his own party and a former Prime Minister has been talking about.
Very interesting. Well, let's put some of this to my next guest. Delighted to welcome back to the show Baroness Natalie Bennett, former Green Party leader. A very good afternoon to you.
Afternoon to you. Lovely to be with you on this glorious Sunday.
It is. We were just saying everyone's very, very, very cheerful. I imagine an awful lot of Green Party candidates and voters are remarkably cheerful, having Tony Blair criticising the Labour Party on this issue. You might be the last party standing pushing this issue at this rate, which may be good for you, may be bad for you. What do you make of what Tony Blair had to say, saying net zero is doomed to fail and we need to change course?
Well, I think we have to ask the question, first of all, of why is this getting so much attention? I mean, there's obvious reasons for questions about various forces within the Labour Party. But beyond that, Tony Blair has been a lobbyist employed by Saudi Arabia, employed by Kazakhstan, supported by Larry Ellison, the world's fourth richest man, according to Bloomberg, a lobbyist for nearly twice as long as he was actually Prime Minister. I don't think this should really get any more attention, deserves any more attention in terms of policy than any other lobbying company might come out with. Now, I understand why it's getting the political attention, but nonetheless, when you actually look at the facts of the matter, Tony Blair is a man linked with Saudi Arabia, linked with Kyrgyzstan, linked with giant American techno bros. Why should we be listening to what he has to say on net zero?
Well, then why should we listen to what an awful lot of people who are on your side of the debate have to say about net zero, when often they are very much involved in, your Dale Vinces and others, in making money from being climate campaigners? I mean, look, no doubt at all he's a lobbyist, and he makes money from Saudis and Kazakhstan and everything. However, he was Prime Minister, elected 3 times to this country's highest office over 10 years. He's still an influential figure in the Labour movement, I would say, in the country largely. If he is then criticising one of these sort of absolute bedrock policies of a Labour government, and his mate Keir Starmer, his mate Ed Miliband, they're all very close. If he's criticising a bedrock policy, which is a bedrock policy which completely directs our economic policy, our security policy, our security defence policy, the cost of living, our energy policy, our ability to continue living the lives we want to lead, because you know as well as I do what would be required of individual people in terms of achieving some of those targets that are still on the statute books. We should be listening to what he has to say, shouldn't we?
Well, first of all, on Tony Blair, this is, of course, the man behind the dodgy dossier. And to define that, those who are perhaps too young to remember that, this was the dossier.
Well, God bless you for thinking that.
Iraq weapons of mass destruction, which turned out to be...
Natalie, I was actually sitting in the House of Commons watching it live, actually, at the time. But there we are.
To address the broader point, what we need to do for net zero is also what we need to do to cut people's bills, to ensure that everyone has a warm, comfortable, affordable to heat home, to ensure that they have clean air to breathe, so that we're not... I'm in East London at the moment, where air pollution levels are extremely high. We want a healthy environment. Look at our energy bills. Reason why we have such high electricity prices.
Oh, we seem to have lost you. Oh, no, Natalie. We've lost, right? I mean, the crucial moment when maybe we're having a power outage like Spain and Portugal, all to do with net zero. I don't know. It was interesting to think about cutting bills. Now, while we're getting her back on the line, the interesting thing, of course, being that even Ed Miliband has been forced to admit in interviews in the last week that we ain't going to be seeing our energy bills going down anytime soon. But also, we're constantly told, well, it's because of net zero. So because we don't have enough renewable energy and we're reliant too much on gas and fossil fuels, that we've got our energy prices going up. But the countries like the United States that are drilling for gas and oil and fracking and getting rid of gas, they haven't seen the same price rises in energy as we have. So it simply doesn't tally with the facts, does it, Claire?
Well, no, it doesn't. And you can't have all things. You can't say that we need to invest in renewable energy because it's going to bring your bills down, but in the meantime we're going to make you poorer because you need to invest into it. You can't have all of this at the same time and suggest that oil and gas is going to be eradicated and you don't need it in the future. Well,
again, no one paying any attention thinks we're not going to be using fossil fuels, which, by the way, are 80%. Yeah. 80% of our energy needs for many decades to come. I mean, nobody actually thinks that. So that's going to carry on. So even when we talk about the net zero policies, we are talking about, like, for instance, net zero 2030, that target which the Labour Party had, and indeed the Tory Party had previously, was for electricity, which is only 20% of our needs. But we saw what happened in Spain and Portugal earlier this week, almost 24 hours of blackout. And again, it's fascinating. It was an extreme weather event. No, it wasn't. They were really, really, really happy to try and push that. And it's amazing how much the coverage of that, if it had been due to climate change, or they could reasonably claim it, like they claim about every wildfire, every flood. Yeah. I mean, it just isn't. It just isn't. It's provably not. They will claim that. Wonderfully, we have just got Natalie Bennett back, Baroness Bennett back. Thank you so much. We've got you back again. We were at a crucial point explaining to me about how net zero is going to help cut bills, Baroness.
Exactly, yes. I was talking about our electricity price, which is 97% of the time in the UK, the electricity price is decided by the price of gas-fired electricity. In Germany, it's only 25%. Across the EU, the average is 50%. It's relying on fossil fuels that's making our bills so expensive. And of course,
it's just, I mean, that's just a sort of I would say a completely crazy situation where the price is set based on the last unit. And if that comes from gas, which it has to be because renewables aren't reliable. But if that were the case, if it were the case that we haven't got enough renewables, that's the reason why. Why is it that when we had that big price shock as a result of the Ukraine war and those sanctions on Russian gas, why is it that America didn't see anything like the same price rises in their energy costs as we did?
Because they have an entirely different system. What we have is a system.
But these things are set by the international gas prices. So why would they not face exactly the same price rise? Isn't it not because they drill for oil, drill for gas, and they frack for gas? They've got their own supply.
The price of gas and the price of oil is actually determined on global markets.
So why didn't their prices go up? Why didn't their prices go up like ours did?
They have an entirely different system, which has worked on different kind of bases.
If the price of gas went up globally, it would have gone up for everybody. That's what globally would mean. So why did they not have the same energy price rises as we had?
Well, I think we're getting away from the point that what we need to be doing is actually the cheapest possible energy you can have, the cleanest, greenest energy is the energy that you don't need to use. And that's what we want to do. And that's why we want to give people warm, comfortable, affordable to heat homes. It's why we want to have efficient appliances, why we want to have...
We want to have all of that. No, that's fine. But again, you're saying cheapest... And you're saying renewable. OK, it's not cheap if you have to have backup. And goodness me, didn't we just see what's happened in Spain and Portugal with the problems with... and again, not me saying it, it's the electricity regulator of the grid in Spain saying this is largely, they think, down to a problem with solar farm supply and intermittent supply and just sort of breaking the grid. And that's what caused that almost 24-hour outage. Huge impact on the country and on individual people. Imagine if that happened here in the UK in the mid of winter. What would happen then?
Well, that's why we need to talk a lot about resilience. We need to make sure that we've got a modern, updated grid, which we haven't got at the moment. And with ageing fossil fuel plants, we need a modern system which is based on renewables. That means you've got a solar panels on the roof of your new house, which should be building every new house.
So that won't work for me.
I
live in a flat. I'm on the ground floor and basement. I haven't got a roof. I don't own a roof.
You have a battery in the kitchen that you're essentially getting free electricity, and you're able to have that there reliably.
Well, that's no use to me. It's no use to the vast majority of people in this country who don't live in a new house, and all the people who live in flats. It's no use to us at all.
Well, let's put the solar panels, if you live in a block of council flats, let's put solar panels on the roof and then you will actually cut your bills. That's we're failing so much when we could be having the cheapest source of electricity available to us would be solar panels on the roof.
Well, it will cut the bills when the sun is shining. It's lovely right now, but in the dead of winter, the sun doesn't shine, often the wind doesn't blow, and that's when we actually need more reliance on getting energy, because to keep our homes warm. You say it's the cheapest. If you have to have backups, which we do, the amount of times we don't have enough solar power, we don't have enough wind power, and that's just for electricity, by the way, that you do have to have a backup. If you're basically having two different sources of energy, and it does cost money to get the gas working or the nuclear power station working, then you're paying twice. So it's not cheaper, is it, if you actually take all the impacts into account?
One of the things you rely on, of course, is interconnectors from parts of the world where the wind is blowing, and you're not relying then on dodgy. We've sort of circled back to where we started, really, in terms of dodgy regimes like the Saudis. We can be self-sufficient in wind and solar and support ourselves and save ourselves money.
But we can't. But we won't be self-sufficient when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. You're saying interconnected. Oh, great. We'll just get everything from Norway. What if Norway's winds aren't blowing and the sun isn't shining, or they need that energy for themselves? Or what if, oh, God forbid, this would never happen, the Russians decide to we know they've been mapping all these cables, decide to do something about that. We had France only a couple of years ago threatened to cut off the supply of electricity to some of the Channel Islands, for goodness sake, and they're supposed to be our friends. We we would not be self-sufficient. We've only got through the Ukraine war and the rise in prices. We're dealing with gas because we've been importing at great expense liquefied natural gas from the United States. There's no prospect of us being energy independent unless we frack and we drill for oil and gas here. Are you under the illusion? And look, this is your area of expertise as a former Green Party leader. Are you genuinely under the illusion that we're not going to be reliant on fossil fuels for pretty much all of our industrial energy needs and our heating energy needs for the next few decades at the very, very least? Do you think we're literally not going to need fossil fuels?
We're aiming for the electricity supply of the government. This is the government strategy to have electricity.
That's electricity. That's 20%. It's 20% for energy needs. What about the rest of it?
And that's where we need to transform. As if we think about home heating, for example, home heating is now very expensive and very polluting. What we need to do is, as much of the rest of of Europe has gone for, is heat source pumps.
We've got very different housing stock from most of the rest of Europe. You know that as well as I do. And Norway might use them all, but you know also that heat pumps are not very good at heating homes when it's cold. And certainly not the housing stock that we've got.
As you said, Norway is a place that has really cold temperatures in winter.
Yeah, and their houses are built with great insulation, and there aren't that many people there, so everyone's got space. They're not living in cramped, prefab accommodation like a lot of our homes in our country. Or are we just going to rebuild all of the homes in the country?
Well, we certainly want to refurbish homes, and that's good for people's health, and it's
Who's
good
going
for
to pay for that?
And that's something that we, of course, creates opportunities for small businesses up and down the
who's
line.
going to pay for that?
Invest in that. Well, let's not invest in nuclear power stations, which cost a massive amount of money, and put that money into home insulation.
I mean, we shouldn't invest.
You can have.
Wait a minute. You believe you want to get rid of fossil fuels. You don't think that nuclear power stations are absolutely vital. We're going to have electricity need go. So you've completely just sidestepped the question about 80% of our energy needs. You can't make concrete without fossil fuels. You can't make steel without fossil fuels. Some of the most vital things that we need. If you want to build and refurbish homes, you might need some of those things. You're talking about electricity. We can't have entirely secure and reliable, absolutely all the time, 24/7 solar and wind. We need to have a backup. Nuclear is the obvious solution. So you're even opposed to nuclear as well?
Well, let's pick up the steel point, because I think there's a really important, and lots of people are very interested in steel at the moment. We export 2/3 of our scrap steel. That's steel that can be melted down and reused in electric arc furnaces powered by renewable energy.
Great, let's do that.
Let's
We
do
also
that.
need to have the ability to make virgin steel. You need fossil fuels for that.
Well, you can actually use hydrogen, but
you need fossil fuels.
But we would be essentially self-sufficient in steel, and we're interested in resilience. We're interested in supply. Be self-sufficient if we recycled all of our own steel.
I think there's different grades of steel depending on what you want to do. Okay, can I come back to Tony Blair? Look, he's saying net zero is doomed to fail. The Tories are now coming round to that idea. Kemi Badenoch is basically saying we're going to drop that 2050 target. I always knew she would. The Labour Party are being told to do that by Tony Blair. Reform Party has long been opposed to net zero targets, saying that they're going to, impoverish our country and won't achieve anything. It's going to be basically the main parties. It's going to be, looks like it as a possibility, only the Green Party and the Lib Dems are going to stick to net zero. Is there anything like a Spain or Portugal blackout, or that happening here, or anything at all? Is there anything that could persuade you that the net zero targets are, as I believe, unachievable, unaffordable, and actually undesirable?
No, because I'm relying on the science, relying on the understanding that the cleanest, greenest energy you can have is the energy that you don't need to use. And that's something that saves people money, that protects people's health. Burning fossil fuels produces pollution, which damages people's health. It's the air pollution.
Well, actually, burning fossil fuels, the Industrial Revolution, has actually doubled our lifespan and has produced things like plastics, which we use in medicine, which absolutely have increased our lifespan and produced amazing economies of scale in factories, which would have been unachievable without fossil fuels, which have meant that we have much better lives. We're not working, people aren't working, 12-hour days, 7 days a week, and they're able to actually enjoy leisure time. I'd have thought you, the Green Party, would enjoy that. We can go and gamble in fields clothes instead.
You may have forgotten discussions we've had in the past about the problems of plastic waste and plastic pollution.
That's
and
a different issue from
we have an environment polluted with microplastics,
well,
nanoplastics.
let's not throw the plastic in the ocean is the solution to that, isn't it? That's not an argument not to have. Do you want to get rid of plastic?
Well, we have to get rid of single-use plastics because
so what about single-use plastics in hospitals?
No, well, hospitals
you keep those.
manage their waste perfectly well. That's manageable. But single-use plastics retail on the high street. You and I have discussed coffee cups before. I don't know if you've got a coffee cup around at the moment.
No,
but,
mine. Yeah, mine. I don't. I mean, I don't buy coffee. I'm not willing to pay £5 for a cup of bad coffee in a store. I'm too tight. Okay. Can I get on to what the Climate Change Committee's had to say? Unelected, unaccountable, supposedly independent Climate Change Committee headed by someone without anything remotely resembling a science qualification. They've issued a new report saying they're the climate watchdog of the government, basically, and they are basically giving advice on the government's legally required sort of net zero targets. They were written into law. And so the government's made very little progress in preparing the UK for growing threat posed by, they say, rising temperatures. And they say progress is either too slow, has stalled, or is heading in the wrong direction. What's your reaction to that report?
Well, I think this is reporting something that communities up and down the land already very much know. I mean, we're coming into local elections very shortly, and people know that preparation for flooding, the kind of things that we need to do, like slow the flow, like prepare land so that it holds more water, so it flows downstream more slowly. So many people live in homes that in summer are becoming essentially unlivable. And that, particularly with our ageing populations, is literally a threat to people's lives. Heat waves are a huge threat in terms of public health.
Are they?
Yes.
You think heat? Yes, I mean, actually, being cold is the biggest threat. 9 out of 10 deaths from temperature are as a result of cold, not heat.
But we're seeing increasing number of days and heat wave days, and you may recall in Europe.
But that means we're also seeing fewer very cold days, and that means fewer people die on those days, and as more people die from the cold than from the heat. And by the way, people wouldn't have to die from the cold if they could afford to heat their homes, and we had cheaper fuel if we were using reliable fossil fuels.
And of course, if we had the homes insulated, then that would prepare them both against heat and cold.
Well, I mean, home insulation is great, but you have to be able to afford to have the heat on in the first place. But heat is not a risk in the same way that cold is. Even in Africa, the vast majority of deaths from temperature extremes in Africa are from cold, not from heat. Why do you think heat is a problem?
Well, just for example, I used to live in a flat that was a 70s concrete flat in central London.
Lots of people's homes.
The box of concrete on 3 sides. And this was 15 years ago at least. Sometimes I would have to, I had a Staffordshire Bull Terrier dog, so I would leave my front door, my public-facing front door propped open to get some airthrow through in the middle of summer. Yep. We have far too many homes that are built in those kind of conditions.
Do you know what the solution would be there? Air conditioning. We should install air conditioning in people's homes. That would be good, wouldn't it?
Well, no, because actually that's...
if the problem is heat, the solution is cool air, right?
Well, the solution is ventilations. They're just like the Victorians.
Well, if there isn't
any
wind,
that if you know the sash windows in Victorian houses, they're designed very well. We need to make sure that we design new houses well with good methods.
Oh, I'm all for that. I think a lot of modern houses are horribly designed and they're ugly as well, and they're not energy efficient. I'm all for all of that. But there's a difference, isn't there, between some very sensible things like that and what the Climate Change Committee has called for, and you know that your party has backed in lots of ways. And it's in black and white. It's not me saying, well, this is what they're going to say. They put it down in black and white in terms of the vast majority of the big changes in our lives that would have to be made for us to hit those 2050 targets that they are legally, the government's legally currently required to do, any government of any political hue, until that, I think it will be dropped, but until then, that actually would involve huge changes in people's lives, basically forcing people, whether it's by taxes or any other way, to eat less meat, eat less dairy, drive EV cars, not their choice of car, petrol or diesel, or drive no car at all, possibly won't be able to afford it, again, because of taxes, not being able to fly abroad, perhaps being limited to only 1 return flight a year at some families, having to have heat pumps which don't work fitted to their homes instead of a gas boiler that works efficiently, is much cheaper and actually heats their home. We're talking about huge changes to people's lifestyles that would be required by these net zero policies. Do you think that the public is going to sign up to any of that?
Well, I've just been around some of the rural areas in Derbyshire, for example, out on the election trail, and people are passionately interested in getting better bus services into rural villages.
Yeah.
And in fact, my fellow Green peer, Jenny Jones, we just had a win on a vote in the House of Lords, backed by the Conservative, to force the government to do a review of village bus services.
And that's got
we should ensure that every village has a bus service.
The people who need the bus service are the people who can't afford a car. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, but what's that got to do with telling millions of people in this country what they can eat, how much they can eat it, what they can drive, how often they can take a holiday abroad, whether they could drive their car or not? Do you think the British people will sign up to that?
I think the British people want the option, for example, of having a decent bus service, and we've got an ageing population, increasing numbers of people
that's not the question I asked you. Lots of people would love to have a great bus service, but answer the question I asked you.
Well, people want a better quality of life, a healthier life. That means they want clean air.
We've got clean air. We've got clean air. Air is cleaner than it's ever been. Do you not look at the statistics? I thought this was your area of expertise. So are you as bad as Sadiq Khan claiming our air is dirty? Areas, yes.
I don't know if you've seen the figures on premature births, on Alzheimer's, on heart disease. All of these are related to levels of air pollution, and of course,
there is some evidence there is a factor for some people living near some polluted roads. But the air in London and every city and everywhere in this country is cleaner than it has ever been. And it's cleaner than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago and 100 years ago. Those are simple factual statistics. You said it just fine. We've got to go to a break. But I asked the question, you say people want to have healthier lives and whatever. People might want healthier lives, but they also say, I want to be able to get on a plane when I want to go on holiday with my family. I want to be able to drive the car I want. I want to be able to eat what I want and choose to do what I want and heat my home how I want. Do you think the British public are going to sign up to what the Climate Change Committee, well, currently the Labour Party, Conservative Party still officially, and the Green Party, Lib Dems are all signed up to, which is actually massive controls and changes on people's individual lives, how they live their day-to-day lives in order to achieve your net zero targets? Do you think the public will agree to that?
I think the public will understand, as the Independent Committee on Climate Change with experts are saying,
they're not
that
experts.
To protect their lives,
got a classics degree, the chair.
Our future, we need to protect against flooding. We need to protect against heat waves. We need to give people warm, comfortable, affordable to heat homes.
And what's that got to do with whether I drive an EV or can eat a steak on a Tuesday night? What's that got to do with that?
What we're talking about is living a life that is in the physical limits of this planet and giving people a much better quality of life. It's the possibilities.
Okay, you're saying we'll have fewer choices, but we'll be happier.
We will have the choices to live a good life, and that means having a bus service, for example. That's something that
fewer choices.
We can agree on. We can agree
fewer
on that.
Choices.
I think that we want the bus. Now, Julia, let's get an agreement on bus services. Finish off with an agreement.
It's completely irrelevant to the question I asked you. But Natalie, I'm being shouted at to stop. I've got to go to a break. Baroness Natalie Bennett, former Green Party leader. I'm glad we got back online. Thank you so much. We're going to go to a quick break. I'm sure you might want to give your responses to this. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
Exactly. And the worry is that standards are already or will in the future be diminished as a result of a kind of equalities drive to get more women into the Marines. Now, as you said, at the moment, no woman has ever made it into that elite, into the kind of the top level, what they call getting the green beret, becoming a Royal Marine Commando. But many are now trying, and there are women in the sort of lower ranks of the Marines.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Well, after spending all that time trying to get an answer out of the former Green Party leader, we are running a little bit over. Let's get a quick reaction from Claire Bissell listening to all that conversation. Always great to see my presenter friend's face during interviews like that. But Claire Bissell?
I can't help it. I can't help it. The talk of state control about how many flights we can take, what car I can drive, what I can eat,
they always
what
try
I
and
can't
keep it
eat.
quiet about that.
Yeah, they do.
Except
and
it's in black and white.
It absolutely is, and they are more socialist than the Labour Party would ever hope to be, the Green Party. This is what they're turning into. They want everybody just to be miserable and cold.
No, we're going to be warm, we're going to have few choices, and we're going to be happy.
Yes. Did you believe a word of that?
No, but that's the thing. But I just, let's just. How are you going to achieve these things? Well, the Climate Change Committee has spelled it out, and there's going to be massive changes on our lives. Okay, we're talking about Tony Blair and his net zero criticisms. Let's go to the phone line. So 0344 499 1000. Nigel's on the line in London. Is it Nigel or is it Nigel Farage? I think he's been busy at PMQs. Nigel, what do you want to say?
We share the same name, but I'm far better looking.
I'll tell him.
I don't know whether Nathalie Bennett believes in a democracy or a dictatorship, but I can tell you something now that I'm fortunate enough to live in the US where in the summer it's 115 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
People are happier. People are more smiling in the sunshine. They're not miserable.
Yeah.
And guess what? We don't have solar panels on the house because they're a waste of money and they don't work.
Yeah, well, you have aircon though to keep you cool. It's absolutely fascinating how we're told constantly about how heat waves are a massive problem, even though of course it's the cold that kills people far more than heat waves, even in the hottest continent, Africa. And when the solution is aircon, they go, oh no, not aircon.
Well, I don't understand because you see, I don't know if people like Nathalie Bennett actually know what they're talking about because of course. Where we are, we don't have central heating, so we have air conditioning, which allows you to cool the air or heat the air.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it does. It conditions the air.
Can I ask you, I've only got a short time, can I ask you what you make of what Tony Blair's interjection on this, though? I mean, you're over in the States, what do you care?
Well, I think that Tony Blair's actually woken up for a change and realised that this net zero policy is not only harming the country, it's harming people's pockets who cannot afford this disastrous policy of Ed Miliband, who's on a crusade. I wonder if Ed Miliband's got a heat pump at his North London house.
Of course he doesn't. Of course he doesn't. He lives in one of those lovely white stucco houses in Primrose Hill. Of course he doesn't have a heat pump. There'd be nowhere to put it. None of them drive EVs. None of them have heat pumps, and they all fly everywhere. And they're all total hypocrites. Nigel, thank you for that. 12:35's time. I'm going to take another break. Sorry, but we obviously went quite long with Nathalie Bennett. Then we're going to be talking about the latest developments on Ukraine with Hamish de Bretton Gordon. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk right now about what is going on in Ukraine, and indeed what's going on in Europe as a result of the threats from Russia, with Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, OBE. He's a former British Army colonel and joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Hamish.
Hi, good
Thank you for joining us. I want to talk about this, sort of the threat of sort of a nuclear strikes, and it's a rather wild speech from a former Russian Prime Minister. But first of all, can I just get your reaction to the statement from the Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, today, saying that Moscow must achieve its aims in Ukraine, but he also said Russia was ready to have direct negotiations with Ukraine over ending the war. He also thanked Moscow thanked Donald Trump for the administration's efforts in trying to secure peace. Is that a change in stance from Putin? And if so, what does it mean?
Well, let's hope it is, Julia. But unfortunately, as we've spoken over the last 3 years, quite a lot of what people like Peskov and Medvedev say is one thing, and what they actually do is something completely different. And until fairly recently, of course, Putin and Peskov and the others in the Kremlin sort of have been riding the crest of a wave and have sort of thought that actually the Americans were behind them. Now, things seem to be changing, and President Trump seems to be getting bored with this and is now sort of threatening Russia, which is making Putin nervous. I think he is really nervous. I think his army has culminated. In other words, it's run out of steam. As Trump said yesterday, they made no ground in the last 12 months or so. And it is now the possibility that if Europe gets its act together as well, Putin could be in a really difficult position. So let's hope they'll come to the negotiation table. Again, President Zelensky of Ukraine only said yesterday he was quite happy to negotiate direct with Putin, which Putin is asking for, long as they confirm a 30-day ceasefire, not 3-day ceasefire.
Yeah. And even the one over Easter that they broke with numerous artillery attacks. And then, of course, we had that attack on civilians in Kyiv. And, finally, some condemnation of Russia's actions by by Donald Trump, which was something to see. This Putin ally, though, he's basically talked about the risk to the brand new NATO members, Sweden and Finland, of basically having to bear with the fallout from nuclear strikes in the event of some sort of conflict. I mean, very sort of wild talk, don't you think?
Well, Medvedev is a very strange person. If you believe the popular press, he's with the drink most of the time, and what he says, you could sort of agree that might be the case. But he and a lot of the Russians have threatened nuclear strikes really from the 24th of February 2022. Yeah. And, I think the Russians are really worried about Finland and Sweden, who have massive armies. Finland can put 1 million people in the field. Yeah. It's, again, they're trying to shape the battlefield, as we call it, so that they can be in the best position to negotiate or keep going. So, yeah, attacking Finland and Sweden, saying they're going to drop a nuclear bomb on them, is what Medvedev would say.
Yeah,
but
that was kind of the reason why both countries that have been neutral all these years, why they decided to join NATO. Again, it's not a NATO expansion, it's countries seeking that NATO umbrella of defence. Now, it is interesting, you talk about the number of troops they could put on the ground. I think they've got a reserve force in Finland of 250,000. We haven't even got a proper force of 250,000, a much bigger country. But latest suggestion that actually European powers between them would struggle to put together even 25,000 troops between them to put on the ground in Ukraine if there were to be a peacekeeping force. This coalition of the willing seems to not be much of a coalition, nor indeed very willing.
Well, I think there's a bit of smoke and mirrors going on here, Julia. 26,000. What we must bear in mind that 26,000 needs to be changed every 6 months. So we're actually talking about 70-odd thousand. Yeah. But if Britain and France and Italy and particularly Germany cannot put 26,000 troops on the ground in Ukraine, I would be staggered. I know as part of this, the Finns and the Swedes and the Poles have said we can't be part of it because we're abutting Russia. if you stop the Russians in Ukraine, the Finns and the Poles think that they're going to sweep round to the north and attack them there. So I think this is. I don't know who's trying to get political gain out of this, but yeah, if the coalition of the willing can't put 26,000 soldiers on the ground, I'd be staggered. Britain could do it for one turn with, there are 100,000 reservists like me in this country who are ready to go when the call comes.
Do you think there is any likelihood we are going to get a peace deal of any worthwhile sort other than a surrender deal? Because we saw, of course, and it's the first time I've had a chance to speak to you since we saw those extraordinary scenes of Vladimir Zelensky sort of, talking closely, head to head with Donald Trump ahead of the Pope's funeral. A lot of people saying, this kind of was a bit of a game changer. These two men who've no love lost between them either before or after that incident in the White House. But the idea that actually Donald Trump, some of the things he said, he seems to be coming round to the idea that maybe Putin's the problem, not Zelensky.
Well, absolutely, Julia. Let's face it, Putin does not want a ceasefire. He doesn't want peace. He's responsible for 1 million casualties, and that is beginning to seep into the mothers of Russia at the moment. So he cannot afford to go backwards in any way. And the only way it can happen, exactly as you say, if Trump flexes his military muscles, then that is when we can get a ceasefire and peace. So I think it's all down to him. And hopefully now he's seen that Putin is the bad guy here and he will do the right thing.
It's funny how he can see it so clearly in the Middle East. And we've got a statement actually from the Defence Secretary, John Healey, right now in the Commons after PMQs about the Britain taking part in those airstrikes along with the US on Houthi rebels in Yemen. Seems to be very clear about who is in the wrong and who's in the right in any other war or any other conflict, but not in Ukraine.
Well, dare I say it, I would never say that the Middle East was a sort of low-hanging fruit, and by destroying Iranian proxies like the Houthis and Hezbollah is the thing to do, and one must give them due credit for that. Slightly more complex in Europe and in Ukraine with the Russians, but I think if Trump leans into this, we can get a ceasefire and a peace deal that suits the Ukrainian people who have suffered so terribly.
Indeed. Thank you so much for joining us, Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, former British Army colonel there, reservist who would be called up in those circumstances. Claire Pistol, your final word on this?
I think that's quite frightening that we would rely on reservists to go and fight a war that we shouldn't be fighting. I really do.
Don't think we should be fighting?
No, I don't think troops on the ground, no. But I don't think we need to...
I don't think we need... The Ukrainians say we've got enough people to fight, we just need the backing.
Exactly, and I think we should still be backing them.
I genuinely don't understand why. Security guarantee. Everyone's completely overestimating how far Putin's willing to go. He's a man who responds very clearly to clear shows of power and force, which we're able to do as part of NATO, and the failure to do it is just abjectly terrible, isn't it? It's been such a pleasure having your company. We're going to let you go now. Unlock the door. You can go and escape into the wonderful sunshine. In just a couple of moments, we'll be hearing from talk presenter and, of course, political commentator Peter Caldwell. He's been watching PMQs. Kemi Badenoch has talked a lot about the grooming gangs. Very much local election territory here. And we'll find out what Nigel Farage had to ask the Prime Minister as well. That's coming up in just a few moments. Big thanks to Claire Pistol. This is Talk.
Are you any good on the recorder? Haven't got one lying around there, have you?
I did
I did play back in the day, but I was very bad, and like most people, I tortured my parents. I used to do Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Yes.
And it was absolutely horrendous, but I was interested to hear that you play the violin.
Yes. Well,
I thought you'd be more of a trumpet player.
No, definitely not. No brass for me, I'm afraid. Very much a strings man. But yeah, I mean, I think I've still got it somewhere. I don't know where it is, but I think it's in the loft or something.
I would like to hear. I think you should bring it out on the show.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 12:48 is the time. Delighted to say that I'm joined right now by Peter Carwell, Talk presenter, and of course, long-time political in-the-know chap. You've been watching PMQs. You should also. We don't have to. We took it live last week. It was actually very lively. Now, local elections tomorrow, last day of campaigning. So obviously, you think that's sort of bread and butter issues on the doorstep in those local council elections would be what the MPs want to ask the Prime Minister about. So what did Kemi Badenoch go on?
Well, there's very little of that. In fact, she talked about grooming gangs. The other big issue.
Is that a big issue for a lot of voters?
Well, it is, of course, and it's a big issue in a lot of areas. But certainly, and it's something that should be raised and should be continued to be raised, especially because Jess Phillips said on Monday, essentially, that Home Office Minister Jess Phillips talked about a possible cover-up at some stage. Very interesting.
And she was denying that she could possibly be involved.
Yes,
in it.
of course.
There were questions from Rupert Lowe, the former Reform MP, and others about this.
Right.
And it is an abject failure to get proper independent inquiry going.
So Kemi Badenoch asked on this in all 6 of her questions. There was a bit in the final question. I haven't clipped it up, but there was a little bit in her final question about the local issues and saying, the Conservative council would mean that these areas would be cleaned up and sorted out. Okay. And Keir Starmer said no, Labour would sort it out. But really, the main thrust of all 6 of her questions today were quite surprisingly on grooming gangs.
About dragging the Prime Minister dragging his heels. Well, let's have a watch and a listen.
It's now 4 months since I asked him for a full national inquiry. Instead, he promised 5 local inquiries. There will be 1 in Oldham. Will he now name where the other 4 inquiries will be?
Why did they not implement a single recommendation in the 14 years they had in office? We're taking forward those. There are recommendations already in place about the change that needs to be taken. They sat on a shelf under the last government. We are acting on them. We are providing for local inquiries, and we're investing more in delivering truth than they ever did.
He cannot name a single place because nothing is happening.
I mean, she's banged to rights on this one, isn't she? And there's no doubt at all that, I mean, a full national inquiry is what the public want, is what a lot of the survivors want. And again, it's an ongoing issue. It's not something from the past, it's ongoing. And you can't have local councils effectively setting up inquiries which aren't, judge-led and having powers to call people in, insist they give evidence, when it's local councils often who are part of the cover-up of these grooming gangs.
Well, they are essentially policing themselves through many of these inquiries.
Worked so well.
Well, it's interesting that Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, wants one, and Baroness Harriet Harman, former Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, wants one, and that was brought up in the second clip I'm going to bring you, actually, about Kemi Badenoch. She really hammered this home quite a lot and said this is not essentially a party political issue. To her, anyway, she says this is something that should be done.
Doing the right thing. Well, let's have a watch and listen to this clip.
Andy Burnham wants a national inquiry. He's not Conservative, he's Labour. Harriet Harman wants one. The member for Rotherham wants one. All of the victims I have met want a full national inquiry. He keeps talking about local inquiries, yet they have not got going. And they haven't got going because local authorities don't want to investigate themselves. Local inquiries cannot force witnesses to appear. Local inquiries can't force people to give evidence under oath. So why won't he have a national inquiry?
Mr. Speaker, we've had a national inquiry. We've had recommendations. There are hundreds of recommendations that have been made in relation to this issue. It is a serious issue. I strongly I strongly believe that we should implement the recommendations that have already been made. And that is what we are doing.
I mean, there just simply hasn't been a national inquiry into the grooming gangs. It was 5 days of hearings, no whistleblowers, no victims of grooming gangs were involved. It was a much wider inquiry. Simply not true. I mean, this one's certainly going to run. I'm glad it's being brought up, even when it's not on front page of the newspapers. Let's also talk, though, about something that is very much on the front page of a lot of newspapers, and that's constantly again and again and again, and that is immigration, and particularly illegal migrants. Nigel Farage, the Reform leader, there's this system in Parliament about, we know that the leader of the opposition gets 6 questions, the next biggest party gets 2, so for a long time it was the SNP, and now it's back to the Lib Dems.
He said nothing of consequence today, which will shock you.
Okay, and then, now, plain night, was he wearing a wetsuit? That's all we need to know.
He wasn't.
Well, there you are then, so relief all round, everybody. But every now and then smaller parties are basically guaranteed a vote, and this time it was Reforms.
It was Reform, and Nigel Farage asked a question, unsurprisingly, the day before the local elections in England, where, of course, Reform are running the Conservatives and Labour very closely. I wasn't surprised that today was one of the days that the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, chose Nigel Farage. He, of course, asked to speak and spoke on people illegally crossing the Channel. We know that more than 10,000 people have done that so far this year, and in quite a lengthy question to Keir Starmer, he asked about that.
Usually gets barracked and shouted at and laughed at whenever he gets up to speak. I don't know why MPs, doesn't matter what someone's saying, I don't know why they don't get how bad that looks and
if you're watching, or you'll hear it if you're listening on the radio, there was one particular MP behind Nigel Farage who was barracking him quite a lot during this question.
Yeah, we don't expect teachers to put up with it in classrooms. In any of your workplace, if you were at a meeting and you got up to speak and people behave like this, I don't think MPs get just how bad they look and sound when they do this. Well, let's have a watch and a listen.
Mr. Speaker, to date so far this year, 10,000 young, undocumented males have illegally crossed the English Channel into our country, a 40% increase on this time last year, many coming from cultures that are somewhat alien to ours. They are being housed at a cost of many billions of pounds a year in hotels and increasingly in private rented homes. The effect on communities is one of a sense of deep unfairness, actually bordering on resentment. In Runcorn alone, there are 750 of these young men. Just in Runcorn. Is it not time to admit that Smash the Gangs was nothing more than an election slogan and not a policy? And isn't it time to declare a national emergency and to act accordingly?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are passing a borders bill with extensive powers to smash the gangs. These are terrorist-like powers that give powers to the police to intercept where they think the suspects are committing people smuggling, which is a vile trade. We must take back control of our borders after the last government lost control. But what did he and his party do? Did they support those extra measures to actually smash the gangs? No, they went in the lobby with this lot in their new coalition to vote against them.
Again, that sort of rowdy behaviour. Look, these are really important issues. These affect people's lives and a massive impact on our taxes as well. The huge cost of this. Again, the phrase "smash the gangs." Well, they've not been smashed because this latest figure, over 10,000 people have arrived. In the
exactly, and where is the deterrent? That's the question that's being asked. And certainly, this immigration and borders bill doesn't seem to be getting the traction that Keir Starmer would like it to. Nobody really seems convinced by it.
No, indeed. But I think by any government's policies on this issue. Let's talk about net zero though, because it's fascinating. Tony Blair's interjection. It made the news yesterday.
Well, I thought Kemi Badenoch would ask a question. My phone has been lighting up with people saying, "Hold on a second, why didn't she go on this issue?"
And again, I think it is a big issue for a lot of people in terms of elections. Tony Blair basically being very critical of net zero policies. Now he still thinks climate change is a crisis. We need to deal with it, but it's about technology, not about the sort of policies that are being pushed currently by this government and previously by the last government, and by the way, enacted into law by Theresa May's government. In terms of that, why do you think Tony Blair interjected then? Do you think he did it with Keir Starmer's knowledge in advance? And is this an anti-Ed Miliband thing? Is it something else going on? Because Tony Blair doesn't just throw something like this in the day before a local election without thinking.
It's always planned in some way, but I think it's more Tony Blair ringing up Ed Miliband or Keir Starmer and saying, "By the way, I'm doing this tomorrow," rather than asking permission. Certainly, I think Tony Blair sees which way the wind is blowing, no pun intended. And he
not blowing.
Or not blowing, exactly. and sees that this is a major issue. He also knows, of course, given what happened in Spain and Portugal, the net issue is the issue of the moment.
But this report would have been compiled
a long time ago, but it's coming out now, and that's not an accident. It's interesting, this was brought up a little bit later at PMQs by a Northern Irish MP called Sammy Wilson. He's been on this network, of course, and what did Keir Starmer say? He said, well, we can't weaponise the fact that Spain and Portugal lost their electricity. We need to be careful about the facts.
And yet they weaponise. If it was down to climate change, as they often complain about any of these things, it's all down to climate change, then they would weaponise it. Yes. But when actually the evidence is from the Spanish grid that actually it was down to problems with solar power and the intermittent kind of solar power and the damage it does to a grid
there's
security.
An inquiry, Julia, and we've got to wait for the outcomes. We can't jump to conclusions.
Absolutely, we never jump to conclusions. Absolutely not. Peter Cole, thank you very much indeed. Let's introduce now what man you might recognise, Mr. Ian Collins, who's busy looking at his phone.
Do you know what I was doing? I was looking at
your show.
The Tony Blair Institute, who are now rowing back a little bit in the last few months.
That's right.
Well, we didn't really say this. He still supports the 2050
Well, he does. No, he still thinks that we should deal with it. It's how we deal with it. Yeah.
And it is interesting. I thought that what you just said to Peter is, day before an election, a couple of days before. Why would you come out with that?
Tony Blair's a bit sort of, highfalutin and hanging around with the Kazakhstanis and the Saudis and everyone now. So maybe he doesn't have to pay attention to local.
And of course, you have to remember, Ed Miliband is more left than an Albanian Keep Left sign. I mean, this guy is absolutely. He's the Corbyn.
But everyone says it's Ed Miliband. This is Keir Starmer's manifesto policy.
Correct. Yeah, but it's that thing where he's let Ed go. Go on, you go. You lost the big job, Ed. You've been royally humiliated, not just because of the bacon sandwich, but because of your policies.
Ed Miliband was once up to be Prime Minister of this country. How mind-blowing is that?
Think about it. Yeah, that's where we were going.
Be in 2015 as well.
Yeah,
that's where we were going. So I think they've sort of largely left him to it. In the same way that Tony Blair left Gordon Brown to the. Tony didn't even know what was in the budget half the time. Give us a clue, I think was the famous line.
Yeah.
He said once before a budget to Gordon Brown.
He would find out a day before, Max.
I think it's a little bit of that with this energy thing. Go on, you carry on with it.
I think it's all down to Keir Starmer. It's